So as we talk, we have 36 interns with us. We get about 1,000 plus applications from the top 5 IITs for internship. So out of that, we take about 15, 20 every year. Last 4-5 years, we've been working with top 5 IIT internship. This year, we have 14 interns from IIT. That is planned day after for them. BITS Pilani, I've been working with them since 2010, while I was still in the Navy. And we started it in Goa. When I came to Pune, they started sending students even. I was in Millet, so they 5 students used to come to Pune also. Then once I took retirement from Navy, they started coming to our center. And COVID, there was a brief break. Again, they have started now. So 17 students are with us now, working on different areas. And St. Stephen's, we get about 60 plus applications. So this year we have 4 students from St. Stephen's. So ours is a multidisciplinary effort. And underwater, I say 75% of the world is water. And in that I say 90% is below the surface. So that is the importance of underwater. And underwater requires specialized acoustic technology to understand and see below the water. And that's my specialization. I did my master's and PhD from IIT Delhi. And I was in Tokyo University and been trying to work on underwater for a very long time. And in the Navy also, I was largely looking at underwater. So when I started this center, we wanted to propagate this thing and build an ecosystem. So it's a multidisciplinary effort. Like we have students from law to technology, of course. So these are the students, and they build the core of our work. And we have 10 research fellows who guide them. And so now, last 3 years, we have built this mentorship method. So some of them stay back with us, and there are fellows who've been with us for the last 5 years. So they're all IIT Bombay, IIT Delhi, Chennai kind of. And in 5 years, they've really developed a lot of depth, a lot of publications. Now we have a series contract with Springer Nature. So this year we'll be publishing 10 books on various subjects. So that is how we have been pushing this. We work on all the 5 pillars: research, innovation, skilling, academic programs, and also policy. So as a think tank also, we have a recognition. But we are a technology-driven think tank. So technology is the core for us. Me being from the technology background, we're trying to push it like that. So we are working on policy, technology, and capacity building. The policy, our paper was sent by Government of India to International Maritime Organization 4 years back. And now based on that, Government of India has been now nominated to look at underwater in Indian Ocean. So there's a task force and we are part of that. Niti Aayog gave us a project to make a report on how capacity building should be done. Because underwater now attained importance. I mean, people have started recognizing. Well, but traditionally, there are more than 6,000 expeditions to the outer space, but only 500 expeditions to the deep ocean. So that is, and we know less than 5% of the ocean. So that's what we thought it's an opportunity. CDAC themselves, they do a lot of work and they have so we thought that it's a good opportunity that we can have a dialogue and I thought this is the best way to present our work. Today, apart from people you see here, Jane has joined us from Tokyo. She is part of the Yokosuka Center for Asia Pacific Studies. Jane, thank you for joining us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for the invitation.
So we'll start immediately now. We have a very eminent panel sitting here also, as you can see in the picture. We have Major General Sengupta, sir, who's the director of one of the academic institutions in India. And we also have a very senior scientist from CDAC, that's a Government of India Research Institute. And they do a lot of data analytics. And in fact, the top supercomputer in India was built by CDAC. So they are here. And also we have a faculty from this batch of students are from BITS Pilani. That's a well-known private university in India. So, and we have also Mr. Praful Talera, who's one of our advisors, Blue Economy, he's one person who has built the logistic business in India in a very big way. So we'll get started. Would you like to say something, Jane, to get started?
Just an honor to be able to see what you all have been learning. I look forward to learning from you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone. My name is Dhruv. I'm a third-year student from BITS Pilani. I'm pursuing chemical engineering there. And today I'll take you through my topic at my project at MRC. It is 3D underwater noise mapping through satellite imagery and machine learning over the Indian Ocean region. So, let's talk about why my topic, why this project actually matters. So, basically, over 80% of the global trade that occurs every day happens through these marine channels across Indian Ocean region. And what these ships and cargo ships, what they do is they produce low frequency noises while they travel. And since marine animals heavily rely on acoustics for their day-to-day activity like hunting, communication, and travel, it really hinders their habitat due to our means. So yeah, that is one of the reasons why underwater noise mapping becomes important subject. Another thing is using hydrophones. Currently, the most reliable method of measuring underwater noise mapping, underwater noises, is using physical hydrophones. But the main problem with that is they are sparsely distributed and expensive to scale over a large area like our Indian Ocean. So that is one of the reasons why a more data-driven machine learning model is required for measuring anthropogenic noises over our Indian Ocean region. So yeah, so let's understand how this mechanism currently works. Currently, we have a two-dimensional framework rather than a three-dimensional. So what the current developed framework says is we take the satellite information, we take use satellite imagery, we use AIS data to pinpoint a particular ship's location at particular over across the Indian Ocean region. We pinpoint a particular ship, and from that we get the relevant information that we want. Suppose a particular ship's length, where it's headed to, its speed. We use that data and we feed it into a source estimation model. We are using a Vatican source estimation model in this in the system. It basically measures the sound that is being produced by that particular ship at that particular location. Then we feed that data into a propagation model, an acoustic propagation model. It is basically an ocean environment physics simulation. So what it does is basically we have the particular source noise estimation using our previous model. We can simulate that noise at different distances, like 5 kilometers, 15 kilometers, 100 kilometers, using a physics model, and that is what a propagation model does. We are using a parabolic equation RAM model. It is a very accurate model for three-dimensional noise map. Yeah, when we have that data, we map it on a 2D noise map, a heat map basically, which is easy to use by anyone who is visiting our platform. So with the current, let's talk about why the current where the current framework lacks. So the current framework is a 2D model rather than a three-dimensional model. So 2D model can't really see how sounds, 2D model can see how the sounds travel across a linear distance over the surface of the ocean, but it can't really see how the sounds that is being produced by a ship is traveling down the ocean, at different depths. So that is where the model currently lacks. We try to use a three-dimensional scale model to estimate that. That will also make the model more accurate and easy to, more reliant to use. So if that video doesn't work. So it's a little visualization of how a three-dimensional model should work. So the ship that is being producing noise is producing the noise at a linear scale, over this direction, but also underground. A two-dimensional model doesn't really consider the underground noises. That's the main issue. Under sea surface. So what were my contribution? What were my objectives? So basically, the current model lacks is a three-dimensional application of that. So my objective and my contribution was trying to implement a three-dimensional layer over the current surface. I surveyed a few three-dimensional geospatial rendering options like Cesium.js and DeckGL to see which one simulates the current model like more accurately. I also created a prototype for different depth view layer application for the current model. And I also like documented and authored the technical review so that any other person who is coming and trying to like further extend this project can do so using the help of that. How I approach the transition is basically 4 steps. First is auditing. Whatever we are trying to implement using a three-dimensional model, we audit it by reviewing the real data that we have. So most of the data that exists in the European Northern Sea region, not in Indian Ocean region, which is quite an issue because the properties of Indian Ocean is quite different from the Northern Sea in Europe. But that is still a reliable data which we can use to audit our models over. The next is evaluating a rendering engine for large-scale machines and large-scale ocean regions. Then creating a small proof of concept, a prototype for the models, and then documenting the framework so that any other person who is coming and trying to extend this project for their own need can do so. So this was another prototype. This was another prototype that I built, and I compared the 3 rendering models, Cesium, Deck, and 3JS, and all of them came out strong and weak at some point. Cesium came out strong when it came to like tagging and bathymeter support, while DeckGL was stronger when we came to like large data set support handling. So analyzing over 23,000 AIs across 8 different players, I realized like using a Cesium.js and DeckGL hybrid model would be like efficient because both of them are a trade-off of each other and they are quite good at different things. So that was what my prototype was based on. So one of the like for a few of the things that were like made this project like hard, challenging was the data that we need to gather to actually implement this model. So the mathematical and AI's data and noise level data came from different sources. So implementing at like the same model, there are different resolutions and different sources was one of the challenges. Using like optimization of the system is also hard because using an ocean environmental model is computationally expensive to build a 3-dimensional model, which like makes the like system slow and inaccurate. So optimization of the system is like heavily required. Again, like using a rendering layer like Cesium and DeckGL were both new to me. So getting them like able to work on a prototype like this was quite a challenge for me. So yeah. So now where this project can go to, so we can integrate real volumetric acoustic simulation over this model to make this more feasible to use at different locations and different conditions. We can layer a live AI's feed so that near real-time value can be simulated and projected over this system. We can also add a time slider so that you can actually see how sound is being propagated from the source to a different location at real time or like even in the past. And we can also explore VR and AR simulations so you can actually see how the sound travels in different, in the ocean region. So thank you. That was my project.
It is very critical underwater noise because even now Brahmaputra we are looking at transportation. So the freshwater dolphins that are there, they will get severely affected by this. So this kind of mapping is very, very important, and this is done based on modeling and simulation. You model the whole place, and then so it is very important. Now big whale strandings and even dolphins will have serious problems when such a thing is. So I mean, each of the project is some real world problem that is being solved. It has got direct application. So I mean, many of our students are labeled as unemployable. This is to so that they understand how real world problem solving. And Andy mentioned there are some challenges that they face, and how they can overcome that is what we try and look at. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. So basically what happens, there's a production. So first shift produces a sub want to simulate what type of is artificial disease. That can be done using an ocean environment, like a physics model. It's a 3D model. It's similar to the ocean environment. So what's the sound there? Yeah, so but the problem with that is it's a 3D model, so it's slow. It's computationally heavy. So that is being issue because if you want to map a whole ending ocean, it's big. So if you want to try to use that machine model, probably frustrate. So that's what we can use machine learning as a server. So basically we feed the machine learning like machine learning algorithm with millions of data that we can gather from these propagation models. So that it can basically estimate what the particular sound that is being generated by a particular sugar different diseases. Without computation, without putting this like load on the machine. No, the physics model is used to produce that difference. We feed those data to the machine. What's the sound level of the diseases? So the environmental simulation thing is offload. No, those were the front. Basically, so currently that's 2D but the problem is that is for 2D field. For 3-dimensional viewing, that is not very good. So those three were front end mapping links. The parabolic equation map model, that's one of the basic applications which we use. That is used to train the
Okay, to do the project, or is it? Yes. So what happens is that there's one research fellow who's already working on a particular subject, and then like the previous project that you saw is underwater noise mapping. So Sridhar is the mentor for them, and he has already kind of harmonized data, and I mean, it's almost 7-8 years of work. So that is done. So he has worked on the front end, building the whole thing. So, and various dimensions are picked up by the students and they contribute to the larger. So it's a continuous work that happens. So like this work also, there are 2 people who've already done some work and then they keep adding. They are here with us for 8 weeks, the BITS Pilani students. With us 8 weeks. They stay here and do it? Yes. Online. No, BITS Pilani students come here. They are doing offline. IIT students are doing online. Yeah.
So hello all, I'm Yash and I'm a student pursuing my dual degree in BITS Goa. So my project here at MS is Cable Segment Vulnerability Index in the Indian Oceanic region. So these are some of the topics which I will be covering today, which is basically the scope of the project, the unique contributions, methodology and the results. So before we actually jump into the project, it is important for us to understand why it is so important and such a critical topic. So as you know that majority of the data transaction or the financial transactions which take place happen in the Indian ocean happen in the form of submarine data cables. Like the data is transferred through cables, which accounts for roughly 95 to 99% of the data. Also, another important factor which we generally fail to take into account is that a cable is not a single line. It is basically various segments which are put together to make an entire cable. So each and every segment has a different sort of thread which actually affects it. So in this project, I'm focusing on 3 major threads, namely the anthropogenic threads, the seismic threads, and the bathymetry ones. Also, one really important factor as to why this project is important is that whenever there's some threat or there's a damage caused to the cable due to various factors, generally the cost of repairing and also the cost of actually spotting where the damage is done is really high. So through this project, I'm actually planning to make I can say a user friendly portal or user interactive portal through which people can actually get an idea about which section of the cable has the most risk of damage, so that as the project progresses further, they will actually be able to precisely locate as to where the damage has occurred. So moving forward, there's actually a model which already exists, which is named as SIRA model, which is a short form for Cable Integrity Risk Awareness. So this model mainly focuses on wind. It basically focuses on wind farm and power cables, whereas the model which I am currently making, the CSVR, it focuses on all the submarine cables, but I would say majority of it focus on the telecom cables. Also, the main difference which we actually have between these two models is that the Sierra model actually focuses more on the installment rather than the maintenance of the cable. Like the main thing which they use is a function known as depth of lowering. Basically, they look after the entire installation process and focus more on that. And based on that, they give 3 color codes, namely the red, amber, and green for the safety scores. Whereas in my models, we are looking at cables which are already existing in the Indian oceanic region. Also, the Sierra model, which is there, it mainly uses uh, it mainly uses uh, just a second. Sorry, the Sierra model basically does not use a composite score, but rather it uses the AIS data to live track the things. Whereas here I'll be using historical data. So basically, in easier terms, quantitative data to make a continuous composite function to give me a risk index score. So for methodology, as I mentioned before, there are 3 main parameters which I'm considering. First one being the anthropogenic parameters, which include of fishing as well as the anchor. The second one is seismic, and the third one is bathymetry. There are various other factors such as temperature and water currents, but those are not included because they contribute to a really small section as compared to these 3 parameters. So how does this project actually work? So basically, we are dividing the entire project using the Uber H7 hexagons. So these hexagons are basically done so that we can isolate each and every segment, which will roughly be of length 5.33 kilometers. And for each of these hexagons, we'll be actually able to calculate a risk index score based on these 3 parameters. Also, one important thing to note is that in this model, I'm actually breaking down into 3 different horizons, namely the 1 year, 5 year, and 10 year. And while doing so, it will actually give us an analysis as to how long exposure actually creates more problems for the cable. Like let's say a cable has been installed for 1 year as compared to a cable which has been submerged for 5 years. So we actually observe that a cable which has been submerged for 5 years is prone to more damages as compared to the cable which is submerged for 1 year. Now, these are some numerical. So my model is actually mathematical based, like my dual degree is math. So here I'll be using numerical models rather than machine learning. So over here, there are 3 main formulas which I'll be using. The first one is the logarithmic formula, which is basically a Gutenberg-Richter formula, which is derived from the Richter scale and is used everywhere. The second one is the bathymetric formula, which is the infinite slope or the safety formula. This is also one of the formulas which is cited in various research papers. And finally, I'll be using a simple Poisson. Poisson formula over here. Like there's no cited formula for this, but this is the basic probability model which you can actually take into consideration. So this is the numerical model which I will be using. So finally, moving on to results and outputs. So basically, this model will focus. In this model, since it's a user interactive portal, so basically user has to select an area on the Indian oceanic region, and based on it, it will actually be able to select which time horizon it is looking for. So let's say he wants to analyze the cable risk score for 1 year, 5 year, or 10 years. So based on that, at the back end, these 2 outputs will be taken into consideration, and using the code which I have got from various sources and the data which I have collected, it will actually give us a PDF format, which will basically consist of a report regarding the area which the user has selected. Also, it would give us the risk index score due to each of its components and as to how we actually got it. So it would be like a complete explanation related document, which would be able to give the user a clear understanding as to why each and every value is mentioned over there. So this is how we actually plan to, this is how the front end would look like. This is not the exact picture, but this is what all features will be available. Like the lines present over here are the submarine cables which are present right now. And so finally coming to conclusion. So like, why is this project really important? So one parameter is that, as we know that majority, looking in the Indian subcontinent, we know that the telecom communication does not really have a lot of knowledge about these things. Like although they have not considered a lot of things. So I believe that if we actually take this project into consideration, it would be really helpful for the Department of Telecommunication to look into it, as well as for as well as for people who are doing further research, this project can serve as a, I would say, as a benchmark to actually work more on.
Important area. So this is a continuation of second or third project. Earlier, what are the causes? Because they could be sabotage, they could be natural causes also. So this is more formalizing that into the risk parameters. So a lot of work needs to be done, and this is one of the very important. I mean, 97% of our data moves through submarine cables, but in a country like India, we don't even have a full mechanism to monitor. This can become. There are countries who have been now. China last year declared that they have cable cutting capability. They can damage cable, and they have announced it through their foreign office. So something like that. There are countries who have been cut off from the internet for. It can be a disaster for any country. I mean, transactions can be stopped.
And India being a service economy, I think it's so heavily dependent on these cables.
Thank you.
So this research work has been sponsored by someone, or someone has asked for it, or you're doing
Not,
it and
not all, but now we have an MOU with DG Shipping and various organizations. So, but the ideas have come from us.
So I've broken down into three factors. One is the 1 year data which will collect it from 2026 to 2025. The second one is from 2021 to 2026. And the final one is from 2016 to 2026. And I haven't gone further than that because generally a submarine cable lasts for 25 years. So I believe that if I go up till 10, 15 years, it would be really helpful as a PDF format. So it basically, there are a lot of improvements which can be made into it. So basically, for some data sources, right? For some data sources, I'm actually using the historical data, but whereas for one, especially the fishing one, I'm using the AIS data. So there's one difference there's one factor which I'm actually getting stuck at, which is basically that since I'm normalizing my entire formula, so I'm not actually able to assign the weights to some factors because when they actually I'm not. Yeah, so like these are actually the formulas that are there on the cited source. Like let's say I just calculate the earthquakes caused in any area of the world. So they use the Gutenberg Richter scale. So if I use for underwater earthquakes as well, we use the same formula. I've basically taken those formulas from there, and the data which I have, I'm basically running them through the parameter through the formulas to actually get a composite score.
So what we have done, ma'am, I mean, we use physical model to model it, and also we validate through available data in the open source. And some of the data which is available, like some of the algorithms, we have validated in some other geographies rather than because it is not available. Like AI is not available freely in India.
Also, I would say that the model is not like really accurate because there's some parameters which I have to actually I have put the values rather than from any open source data. Yes. So these are some values which I have put, like for example, for earthquake. So basically, I have put the maximum distance up to which it should actually take into consideration the earthquake effects. Like I cannot keep the distance as 1,000 kilometers or 1,200 kilometers. So those are some parameters which will affect the score, but it would be quite precise that manner. Yes, so when the user selects any area in the Indian oceanic region, so basically it will consist of a cable segment at least, if not the entire cable. So for each and every segment, it will give us a different data. So let's say I take a segment in the Arabic Sea. So over there, the risk caused by earthquakes is really low as compared to the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So comparing those two, I'll actually get that in the Andaman Nicobar Islands, and the weight assigned to earthquake is really high as compared to the cable current Arabian Sea. So that is the difference which will be able to spot. So I'm trying that, but I will have to actually run one final simulation with it. So I've actually, based on the data, I've asked it to create a function for each and every weight so that whenever it goes near the site of any particular event, it will assign a larger weight over there as compared to other factor. So that's what I've been doing for it. But there's no one fixed formula which I've been using. I've asked it to derive a formula based on the distance from the disastrous location. I'm not actually sure about the Tonga case, but I've not considered underwater volcanoes over here. I've just considered underwater earthquakes and due to bathymetric shifts which actually occur over there. So I've not considered underwater volcanoes in this scenario. Like based on the research papers which I actually read, I did not come across this case. Like the major one which I came across was 2006 Taiwan tsunami. The 2006 thing which happened to Taiwan basically cut off the internet for 3 weeks. So that was the reason due to which I focused on these 3 parameters and I did not take this one.
So we'll note it down, Jane, and we'll factor this in future. Kanale sir, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, am I audible? I think I was unable to hear you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're audible, sir. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. I think it's. Thank you very much for inviting us, and it's.
Thank you, sir.
I hope it will be great interaction today.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
And very thankful to Praful sir. I think he was the. He visited us. He saw our facilities, and hopefully, Ruma can actually guide something, help us getting something very useful for digital ocean. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. I'm there online, so I will be listening.
Yes, sir.
To the, yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. I'm Shiran Jaswal, and I'm currently pursuing a BE in Computer Science from BITS Pilani, Hyderabad. And I'm here to brief you on my project oil spill detection using Sentinel-1. It's SAR imagery. So I'm trying to use deep learning and SAR imagery to detect the oil spills. So before delving into what the project is, I would like to brief you about why is it important. So as we know, oil spill can cause a lot of ecological, biological damage, and even to the coastal economies because they thrive on fishing. So which makes early oil spill detection very important, so that you can respond faster and you can control the damage if you respond faster. And why I have chosen to use SAR imagery instead of traditional optical imagery, it's because like the traditional imagery can be clouded by thunderstorms, rainstorms, day and night. So what SAR imagery does is it reflects basically the electromagnetic waves, and according to the backscatter value, it tells you if it's dark or not. So yeah. And so the main problem is the lookalike challenge. Basically, okay, see, this is an algae bloom, and on the previous slide, this is an oil spill. Now, to you, it may be different, but to the SAR imagery, it will be similar. So this is like the main problem, and this is something I haven't implemented yet because it's just this is just a hypothesis. So there would be some hypothesis testing involved. Actually, the entire thing is a hypothesis, but yeah. So yeah, this is not implemented, but this is what I've thought that I'll do later on after actual testing. That I'll implement a route-aware solution. Basically, okay, there are a lot of ships here, so we'll construct a heat map according to it, and yeah, there is a higher chance of a oil spill occurring here because there's a lot of ships. So this is what I'm trying to do, and the key stakeholders are maritime authorities, environmental agencies, so that they can correct the rate of the oil spill, and shipping industries, so that they can also respond. Right. So yeah, the unique contributions, route awareness, as I told you, it's a work in progress because I need some hypothesis testing to actually include it into the project. Hybrid architecture, I'm using a SVM. So basically, SVM is just a machine learning model that can like identify geometrical features, and according to it, it can filter stuff. And YOLO for deep learning verification, which is image detection model that employs deep learning. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to achieve a highly efficient model which can actually detect it faster rather than focusing on actual like the accuracy, because in the end what matters is like the time, because it doesn't matter, right, if you are accurate and you respond later on. So yeah, so this is the pipeline. First we'll do data acquisition. So what I did is I used Sentinel-1 SAR data from Copernicus. And okay, this is region selection. I would, if I were to do it, like implement it, I thought I'll take AIS tanker data. According to it, I'll make the heat map, but like this for later on. and then pre-processing so that I can actually convert the data into some meaningful data, and then actually doing the image detection part. So yeah, after I have pre-processed the data, phase 1 is SEM candidate screening. So basically, this whole idea is based on how, in general, on normal websites, we employ how we fetch the data and how we filter out data using SQL. Like we structure the queries in a way so that it's actually faster. So first we'll do SEM candidate screening, which is very fast because it just looks at the geometrical features and according to it, okay, this might be oil spill. Then it goes to our YOLO4 model, which actually does the image detection part. It is kind of slow. That's why we are doing it later on. So it will actually figure out if it's an oil spill or not. So yeah, strategic advantage I have already covered. So yeah, this is basically the demonstration. I took a synthetic data, right, and I passed it through SVM. So let's say there are 100 candidates, 100 dark spots. The SVM thing filter out 5 of them, and yeah, see, 10 extracted, 5 passed, and then our YOLO model detected 5 of them, and according to it, it gave these results. So basically, precision, like how much of it is correct, and recall is basically out of total how much it got correct. And S1 score is basically the square of geometric mean of these two divided by the arithmetic mean. This is the actual value which we need to see. It should be high.
This context,
YOLO basically is a deep learning model, which is a pre-existing model. So basically what it does is we train it on a data. Okay, I'll give it some data. This is an oil spill. This is not an oil spill. This is an oil spill. This is not an oil spill. And according to it, it will learn that, okay, yeah, this might be an oil spill. Then when I pass my SVM screen data to YOLO4, it will tell you if it's an oil spill or not. Because see, this is kind of weak in terms of detection, but we are employing it so that it can filter out of 100, let's say it filters 50 candidates. So you only have to check for 50 because checking 100 is very slow for YOLO. So yes, this is basically it. And yeah, so as I told you, this will help maritime authorities, environmental agencies, shipping industries. And overall, the achievement is a highly scalable framework, scalable because it's faster and it balances data into its and computational efficiency. So yeah, basically this is it. Thank you. Circular wave. Okay, so see, I have limited it to YOLO4 because I was basing my entire project. I was basing the entire project on previous research, so that there's actual framework there. That's why I used YOLO4 because it has been used in a previous research. Same for the SPM that I decided to use. So okay, synthetic data. No, synthetic data means the data is generated using Python. Because see, I haven't trained the model yet. I just wanted to provide a proof of concept. That's about it. Yes, there were data sets, but the thing is, okay, I have an RTX 4070 and it has around 2000 CUDA cores. So it was not possible for me to actually train it on bigger data. That was the limitation. So I just tried and did this so that I can at least provide a proof of concept before the end of the term. So I just borrowed those researches, and I thought my hypothesis was maybe if I combine these two, I will get a faster detection algorithm. I have to do some hypothesis testing to actually employ it. But yes, this is the state of the art. Like the algorithms I employed, they are one of the So the literature service I did, it's entirely based on that. I haven't done anything new by myself other than the screening part. That's it.
Coming in, the first task has been done, and then identify the research gap, and then they move forward. That we try and ensure.
Yeah, most of the literature was on the accuracy, but I think speed matters more than accuracy in this case because we need faster response times. I'm not saying accuracy is not important, obviously. You can't just send a response team there and for there to be just algae bloom or something. Then that will, yes. Yes, I just wanted to do it quickly and provide a proof of concept that, yeah, it does work. Yeah, the data set was well, that is lacking, but yeah.
So hello everyone, my name is Yan Sayed and I'm studying computer science at BITS Pilani campus. So my project is oil spill drift simulation, which is basically a sequel to his project. His was detection, mine is simulation. Yeah, I ended up using the same image as a coincidentally. Yeah, so I'll just quickly go over the same thing which you went over. There are many impacts like the marine life, like in large oil spills, like for entire decades, there's no wildlife down to the ocean floor. You won't find anything of that. Even mangroves, if like it goes to a coastline, the mangroves die out. And yeah, fisheries, of course, like they also in oil spill affected areas, no wildlife survives. So people who are dependent on fishing, uh, like their livelihood will be lost. And yeah, in the last like 50 years, like 1,800 medium to large oil spills have occurred, and several more small scale oil spills have occurred. So that's a huge economic loss as well because we are losing our natural resources in this manner because there's no way to actually uh, collect the spilled oil. What they basically do is they skim the oil and it's basically unusable. It becomes, it changes chemically, sort of. So, if we can't stop the oil spill, we should at least be able to help in its cleanup. So, we can help with that by oil spill modeling. So, there's been years and years of research in this field. There are like multiple equations for each of the processes. There are multiple processes that occur to the oil after the oil spill. So the simulation is basically like the first few days after you detect a spill. So the oil particles are modeled according to a numerical model which follows the physics equations, and then you can see which area will be affected. So that helps the cleanup crew. And you can also see like if it will reach the coastline or not, so you can secure your coastline as well. So basically, there's two kinds of fluid mechanics: Lagrangian and Eulerian. Eulerian is when you treat a fluid as a bulk and you apply equations to the bulk of the mass. But oil doesn't actually behave like a bulk; it actually splits up into multiple parts. It behaves more like particles. So Lagrangian fluid mechanics is when you treat fluid like a bunch of particles and you apply equations to each individual particles. So like years of research has shown that this is the most accurate way of modeling oil. So the inputs that we require is basically the location of the oil spill, the type of oil spilled, so that we can know the properties, density, etc., and the amount of oil spilled. With that and years of equations in our hand, it's pretty easy to do it. Yeah, but there's a bunch of things which happen to the oil. There's basically spreading and advection. So when it's spilled, there's a bunch of it in a water column, like a few feet below the surface. But after like 10-20 days, it becomes like a millimeter thick slick. And yeah, it gets like some of it evaporates, some of it like sinks to the ground and mixes with the soil, some of it gets dispersed. So it's a very complicated process. So I went through a lot of the research papers and I identified the three main processes behind it. So these are just like the differential equations. They are not actually the ones that you can use in a numerical model. So this one is the most important one. This is like the wind and the water, they push oil on top of it, and the majority of the velocity is caused by this. And advection diffusion, this basically changes the amount of oil, like how amount and density, like some properties of it. At the end, you get like something called an oil budget, which tells you how much evaporated, how much like sunk down, how much is still in the water column, how much is in the slip. And this is called the third one is the vertical mixing. So if you don't implement vertical mixing, then your model will falsely do a lot of spreading. So that will be incorrect. And yeah, I tried to model it, and I have to be honest, I couldn't do the oil. I couldn't model the oil within process. I misjudged how long it would take to implement me, because there are like 8 different equations, and there are like the vary in sensitivity, which ones matter. Mostly evaporation and emulsification are important, but the rest, I couldn't figure out how to assign weights to these equations. So I left them for now. So yeah, in my review, I found out what was the best approach. So when you get the droplets, like when you make the particles in which you would apply physics. So like older models, they use like fixed classes. Like every droplet will have the same size, but that's not how Excel oil behaves. So you need to have a range of oil droplet diameters. So you have to calculate that using another equation, and then we don't have an equation for turbulence. So what we do is we apply random ticks to like all particles, and that is how we model turbulence. So the basic random walk approach, what happens is like there's diffusivity, which is basically how turbulent a region is. So in this, when oil goes to low diffusivity zone, it will get stuck there, because there not be enough force or kick to move it out of there. But in reality, oil will never get stuck on a water surface; it will always be moving. So there's a Visser corrected random walk scheme which like handles that, and then surface spreading. Yeah, if you don't include 3D vertical transport, then you will overestimate spreading. That's why I included that. And yeah, Eulerian is it's only accurate when it's near the spill source. After that, it's not accurate at all. So that's why I went with the Lagrangian approach. So the beneficiaries, mostly the Coast Guard, because they'll be able to simulate in case of earthquakes where most of their manpower will be needed, and the regulation agencies, they can do risk assessments like this coastline or these mangroves. What is the risk that if an oil spill occurs here, what is the probability that oil will end up here? And yeah, port authorities and Ministry of Defense as well, they can also benefit from good oil spill model. So yeah, so this was something which gave me a lot of trouble, the entrainment rate coefficient. It's sort of not very accurate, the equation for it. The value was going very high, and it was not modeling it realistically, so I had to introduce a cap to the entrainment rate. So there's more research needs to be done on this subject, but maybe without research as well you could find a solution, but that was the best I could do. Yeah, oil weathering processes, we need to implement that. I couldn't do it, but if you want to know the oil weathering, this is important. And yeah, the database, sometimes you might not get some certain properties of oil from the RDOs. Yeah, I didn't talk about databases. Basically I'm pulling water velocity from CMEMS, Copernicus, and I'm pulling wind velocities from ERA5, and I'm pulling the oil properties from NOAA's RDOS database. So this is like the long-term plan, like building the model, which I sort of did. And these two are remaining, like testing it against the other oil spill models, and then testing them against actual like documented oil spills, and yeah, picking it up with like his projects with, and yeah, that's it. So now I will show you the results. I generated this like this morning. So these are the inputs I gave. Yeah, I used mass instead of volume because like the density might change, but it doesn't matter. You can use volume as well. I can change that. So 50,000 kgs of oil was spilled in this location of the type Bonnie Light. It's a lightweight oil. At this, like this, I chose like a random in the somewhere in the ocean I wanted. So it's like near Africa. So yeah, the model how it works is there's a time step involved. So it will apply the equations to our particles and it will find out the trajectory at every time step. Like it will find out how when it where it will be after 1 minute. Then after 1 minute, it will take fresh data of where it's gone, like the water element was there, and it will apply again equation, and then it will find out where it will be the next minute. Because like computers, they have to be discrete; they can't do continuous. And I simulated for 12 hours because so it doesn't take too long to generate. So this is the droplet size simulation, which not too important, but it was one of the things that you need. And like this is the 3D water column. This you can see like how this is at the end of the 12 hours. Like most of the oil is here, but some of it is below the surface. This is just a simulation. This might or might not occur. It's like stochastic because we used random picks to generate it. If we ran it again, we'll get something slightly different. Even I don't understand what this is. I generated. You get a net CDF file as an output. It's a trajectory file, and I don't know how to open it. You can just visualize it using different tools. And I converted it to CSV and I opened it in QGIS. So at the beginning, it's like this, all of them bunched together. And then, yeah, I added a video of it spreading. It doesn't spread a lot because like 12 hours is not enough time for it to actually spread. If you can see, it had started here and it only spread till here. If I had run it for longer, then it might have gone like here, and it would have spread a lot. So that's it for my project. If you have any questions, backend. I mean, I build a numerical model, right? So it solves like a numerical model. The job of a numerical model is to convert an equation into something. Basically, any differential equation you can break it down into a linear one, and the computer solves it in a discrete fashion. So there's like 8-9 different equations. I turn them into like linear equations and then wrote the code for it, and that's how it works. I mean, it's a numerical model, not an ML model, so it just ran on a CPU. It's not terribly expensive, computational expensive, because there's no learning or vaporization involved. It's literally just like a computer calculating things. So like if I had ran it for longer or if my time step had been shorter, like I was doing 30 seconds, that is a very short time step. You might get results which are less reliable that way. But if I had done that, that would have been long. This like took me 1 minute to generate, but yeah, you could do that if you want more accurate or something. Then it will take a bit longer, but not like an ML model. Though that is another story.
Good morning, everyone. I am Preena from BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus, and I'm pursuing my bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering. And today I will be presenting my work on integrating seagrass extent and change for the Indian Ocean region under MRC's initiative. So the problem that we are trying to solve is hidden in plain sight, seagrasses. Though they only occupy 0.1% of the global oceanic seafloor, they act as blue carbon reserves and store up to 18% of world's entire blue carbon, which is more than many tropical rainforests. They also act as a coastal shield. They minimize the shoreline wave energy that hits the coasts by 40%. And in many in many regions in the Pacific Ocean, they are also the world's most productive fisheries. So the research, the data that exists already has many gaps. The first thing is baseline discrepancies. So the global estimates, as mentioned here, is 1,77,000 to 6 lakh kilometers square. But this is just a mere estimate, it's a guess. Second comes the turbid blind spot. So satellites, whenever they enter any water where the depth exceeds 8 meters, they kind of misidentify the canopy from just bare mud. The third is fluid ecosystems. So there are different environmental parameters that keep on changing with time, be it the chlorophyll quantity, this dredging factors, coastal runoffs. And the fourth one, the max entropy modeling. So a lot of research that currently exists is not really specific for the Indian Ocean region. And that's why we use max entropy modeling, and it ends up identifying false positives in region where it's physically impossible for the seagrasses to exist. So how do I aim to address these gaps? The first is the spatial and temporal gaps. So I've used 10-meter spatial resolution for Sentinel data. I have identified those bands which are required for the signaling, that is B2, B3, and B4. So that is basically on different colors like blue, green, and red. The second is eliminating the blind spot. And I've also used B4 and B5 because the color red, when it reaches the color red, when it is used in Sentinel mapping, the reflectance is really bad. The third is accounting for environmental fluidity, as I mentioned in my previous slide as well, and correcting the false positive errors by doing terrain stratification, changing the slope gradients in my while mapping. So the total area was around 27.4 million square kilometers, but my area of interest was much smaller because I wanted to make it more precise. So this is the Park Strait and Gulf of Mannar region in IOR, and this is how I tried drawing polygons manually. And then what I did is I marked it into I kind of classified it into tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 regions. And I've been currently working on tier 4 as well. I've used around a total of 3 data sets. The third one is still being under use. The first one being WCMC, and second one being Allen Coral Atlas. So, and then I had structured it into a 6-step GEE architecture, which is a cloud architecture. Instead of just taking raw data, that consumes a lot of terabytes. So, and then I've loaded the Sentinel-2 imagery, applied JEPCO bathymetry grids, and used water column correction. And then after doing all of this, and after rectifying the parameters and everything, I've put it into an SVM classifier. So SVM classifier is basically to identify and separate the boundaries between seagrass regions and non-seagrass regions. And also because different boundaries in the global map, they have different shapes. I mean, it could be a line, it could be a curved boundary, and so on. The tier 1, 2, 3 regions, including Gulf of Mannar and Park Strait, I used mostly Sentinel satellite mapping. However, the Eastern African coast, which I'll be showing in the next slide, we cannot just simply mark polygons there because the data is because the seagrasses there are patchy and very inconsistent. So it is a 4-step process. So having a scriptable workflow, which is like the code. The second is debugging. So while doing it, I faced quite a few challenges. I mean, I was using scaling parameters which were leading to overload of the server. And then there were sampling errors and miscalculation of the field names and field values as well. So later I built the training set and rectified those. And the classifier, as I said, I used SVM. And then finally, so I used it all in using Python API. I used Google Colab, and then later reproduced it into GitHub for reproducibility. So as it's listed here, quite a few metrics are listed here. So the confusion matrix, I went through like 2-3 iterations. The third iteration isn't mentioned here. I went through 2 iterations, and I tried increasing the accuracy by changing by changing the scaling and parameters. So this is the over accuracy. I changed it from 71.7 to 80.17 because earlier it was just guessing the classes and it was giving the same values for any kind of data that you change output. So yeah, the root cause was raw reflectance values in the thousands, and then I rescaled it. So for Gulf of Mannar, I achieved something like this, which shows the seagrasses regions. So on the left, these are basically islands in the Eastern African coast. And as I was saying, we cannot use polygon data. I had to shift to point data, so that we get it more consistent. So this was using Sentinel, and this is where I mark polygons. This is for point data, where I used maximum entropy. So the Tier 4 region classification is still left, and I'm currently working on making the Bay of Bengal region mapping more accurate because it has turbid waters. The most important part of the project is MSP integration. So first is to get a normalized baseline. Second is having quantifiable buffer zones, and by that I mean, so even though initially I just used 10-meter spatial resolutions, but we need to have room for error. So like we need to scale it to maybe 20 to 30 meters, so that we can identify what exactly the land is being used for, whether it's for some resort developments or for some commercial use. Third is actionable GIS layers. So as I've been using the QGIS software for exporting the data, here is where I get the layers. So this is just a decision matrix which I had framed quite in the beginning. So it has the environment, the kind of environment, and what regions in the IOR exactly fall into that environment, the methodology that I used, and why did I use it. A few deliverables could be the cloud earth engine architecture, which I have. Error verified atlases as well. I do have per pixel confidence flags so that we get an honest carbon accounting, not just guessing it. And third is high fidelity spatial overlays. So there's a lot of future scope in this as well for policymakers and people in marine developmental projects. The first is use of underwater vehicles, side scan sonars. The second is there are many science citizens platforms to validate those high turbidity patches. And the third is achieving a long-term ocean governance mechanism. Yeah, thank you. So what happens is in the first iteration, it took the most amount of time because it was the first time and I did not have much knowledge as to how do I do it. So it took me I was running the codes one by one. So like every code like around takes 1 to 2 minutes. And so it's like there were many lines. So around one hour for the entire iteration, and then rectification even before the second iteration. So even that took another 2 hours. And then I came with the second iteration. So the WCMC one, which is that I've used completely. Yeah, and second is the Allen Coral Atlas. I've also used that, but I haven't used it for the Bay of Bengal region yet because it's a bit tougher. So I have to still work on it. Yeah, I've been checking it still. It doesn't definitely give the same results. Like I have to keep on modifying it. So SPM, first of all, is a very widely used classifier, especially if you're doing a project on mapping and detection. Like since my one is not something like simulation or modeling in that sense, so I kind of researched on the existing papers, and a lot of them mostly used SPM. Now that I had to go through, and I did go through another classifier as well. I'm currently unable to remember the name. And I tried it for like not for the entire iteration, but like maybe a few lines of code, and it didn't work out that well. I mean, the accuracy was low. There's also random forest as well. Yeah. But as I said, not for the entire iteration, just for a few lines of code to check if that gives anything.
This AI and underwater data analytics certification course. Oh. So many of them can join that. Oh. So already we have started that. So there are some startups and even some industry people have also joined that. So that's already launched. So how much? We call it 6 months because now what these kids are able to do in 2 months, other students would take at least 6 months. So that's why we have said 6 months. But if you finish it before, we don't have a problem. So, and this is a completely hybrid program. I mean, my feeling is that like many of these students are able to handle online, but I find many other students get distracted in the online program. So we have a infrastructure. If they want to come and spend some time with us, we are happy to accept them. I mean, face to face has its own. Like my team is always here. They can also do the mentoring, a bit of hand holding, and we also will provide data if they come here. So that all can be done. So Sridhar will make a presentation on that. So that certificate course is definitely available, and that anybody can join anytime. So what we have said, we start every batch will start from first of the month. Otherwise, it becomes difficult for us to manage. And a lot of it they can do while they're already doing some other program. Set mechanisms like BITS Pilani has its own mechanism. So I mean, BITS Pilani sends them at a particular time because they have a very set program. Because they also invest significantly in terms of faculty being here and all that. So and for every station, and I have almost 12 years, 15 years now with BITS Pilani. And IIT students also now about 5-6 years we've been working with them. So these are set timings for them. But for other students, like the final year project, which is a 6 months, so I mean, which is I think 12 credits, right? So up to 18 credits we can take care under the certificate program. So your students, one is the internship that they need to show. Second is the final year project that they need to show. Third is the certificate course that they should show for interviews, job interviews. All that can be taken care. And what happens is when they do these programs, they are also reviewed or they get to interact with, like for the BITS Pilani students, the mid semester review, Admiral ESP Verma was sitting here. Mr. Admiral Verma was the Director General of the Nuclear Submarine Project. He was Chief of Material in the Navy also. So Sir has been my mentor for a long time. Sir came and spent more than half a day. Then Dr. Bharucha, the very well-known environmentalist. Then we had two senior scientists from CSIR, NIO. Goa has a center in Kochi. So two scientists came from there. And then we had two industry representatives. So we get them these interests. So even what you said about what are the validation from that happens regularly. So we get to, I mean, when the students come here, then we also have diplomats for the IIT students. We had the first review, we had Admiral Ashok Kumar, who was the National Security Advisor's deputy, National Maritime Security Coordinator. Then few diplomats. So they get to interact with a lot of people. Like on 17th, we have the review for the IIT students. We have a former diplomat from India, a former diplomat from Bangladesh, then the chief hydrographer of Sri Lanka, then a fisheries minister from Maldives, who's a PhD on fisheries. So like that, we have people interacting with the young students. So they get a different exposure. So even for the certificate course also, these kind of interactions will be there.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Omkar. I'm a mechanical engineering student from BITS Pilani campus. And I worked under Sridhar sir, and my project is predictive habitat mapping for the Indian Oceanic region megafauna using spatial marine learning, machine learning. So what the problem statement actually states that as the rise in blue economy as we have seen in the past decade or 2 decades, we see that many of the shipping routes has been going through the Indian Oceanic region, specifically the Arabian Sea side. And due to that, whatever the developments have been happening in that region has been causing problems to the underwater megafauna, which are the whale sharks, humura sharks, etc. So now the shipping routes cut through the migratory corridors for blue whales, fin whales, as I mentioned. So what actually happens is previously whatever the marine protected areas were there, they were based on 2D spaces, not on 3D spaces. Now what we are trying to do is make it into a 3D model so that we can be getting more accurate protected areas and have better areas for and better policies for them. So can actually spatial marine learning help us in this model? So what we do is we use these data: sea surface temperature, chlorophyll A concentration, mixed layer depth, and the marine currents that are useful in the nutrient and other data, and seabed depth and slope morphology, etc. are all the other data that we use for the spatial learning models. So what actually physics works is that whales are not random walkers. They generally migrate only where there is a scarcity for food or they are looking for mating and all that other reasons. So what we are trying to do is look into all those models, all those parameters that are being used by them, and create a model that will run on that. So how actually upwelling works is whenever the wind blows over a particular oceanic region and the water is moving along with it, the deep, cold, nutrient-rich water rises to replace it, and because of that, whenever there is a rise in chlorophyll concentration, the more fishes are present there. There's a phytoplankton bloom, and there is a zooplankton expansion. So whales follow these zooplankton to the coastal regions. So that's how we see that Somali current is world's most powerful upwelling system, and this creates an immense blue wave breeding season during the southwest monsoons, which are the current going season. Then Arabian Sea is one of them, and the Sri Lanka Dome, which is the Kanyakumari part that we have been. So what actually happens is the observer bias issue is when we are able to track where the whales are. But the thing is, we are always looking at a particular shipping route or maybe where the research is already present. It's not, we all don't know where the whales are actually present or where they will be going, but it's just that we will be having bias sightings. So when there are bias sightings, the machine learning model is just works on what we data provide to it. So it will always corrupt the final results and we'll get wrong. So for that, we will be working a new physics or mathematics. In this, we used a kernel density estimate in which we take the particular region where the humans have looked and not the whales, which actually where they are. And then we force the background sampling instead of random background points. We force the maximum entropy model to sample its background as the pseudo abscess is proportionally to the KDA surface and the matching. So we match the spatial distribution, and this will cancel the bias, and then we will be able to use the only biological models or the parameters that are being used, such as the chlorophyll model and etc. So now, what's the result of this? Maximum entropy model now evaluates where the only sea surface temperature is present, the chlorophyll concentration is present, and we get a better result and better score. So after running all these models and simulations, we get a map. So the thing is, this map is based on where I have used the kernel density estimate. Before it was surrounded with a lot of coastal points, but that would give us an inaccurate data because at coastal regions, the chlorophyll concentration is higher, but the whales are not being able to come because of the seabed depth, etc. So what we find is Somali coast and Arabian Sea self robust hotspots, and even after the bias correction. So we get to know that these are the hotspots for these particular species, and we validated this data with the telemetry data which the whales are being tracked. So not all of them species are tracked, but some of them are tracked, so we confirmed it with them. So the front-end architecture is when we get the data, we create an HTML file and we make a map of it, as I showed in the previous slide, and then we upload it to on the website. And then we can also add which species are we looking, which season which we are looking for, and which particular area we are looking for. In that, we can be using this data for policy making in the future. Yeah, so real world policy impact. So the habitat map is not just a research output, it's an actually operational data layer which will help government or maybe marine bodies. So dynamic vessel routing is one of the solutions that we can do. So port authorities query the monthly heat map before approving transit plans. Then vessels are rerouted according to the protected area. So let's say there is a Mumbai coastal region. There is we see that migratory pattern is going to happen in this period. We will reroute the ships so that they will not go from there, but they will try and approach other ports. So routing adjustments, as I just mentioned. Then the seasonal speed restriction zones. Again, this is one of the major thing that we can do. As the URN is one of the major reasons for the ship strikes and etc. We will be maintaining a particular speed limit that will help the megafauna to be, get less affected by the URN and etc. And then we will be able to save the more megafauna using these. So yeah, what I actually plan to deliver is the bias corrected habitat model, which is the maximum entropy, plus the boosted regression trees, which will be able to give us a scores, and using the scores we can plot where they are more, so they can be present there. And yeah, the second is the live interactive web map, that in that which we can use species and etc. And yeah, that's it. That's my project. Thank you.
They follow the climatic patterns and all. So can that also be used? I mean, that can we get some?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's easier to track land animals, but
talking about the climatic thing, those that can also be a factor you.
Yeah. The climate is
logic is you to see.
the southwest coast is by
Whenever they would launch voyages, they would put climate like the skies for navigation as well. So the animals, these mammals are far more sensitive to those. They can predict the monsoon months before. We can also, at best of our scientific models can.
The nutrients
Yeah.
displaced, so that's what they have.
Good morning. A storm surge module for IOR coastlines. Main goal is to shift how we handle coastal flooding. So instead of just reacting after a storm hits, we will use data to accurately map the risk beforehand. First, let us look at the threat. The Indian Ocean region is highly vulnerable to tropical cyclones, and the most destructive part of any cyclone is the storm surge, which is the massive wall of ocean water that gets pushed onto the land. So currently, our mapping of this threat is incomplete. While we do have data from past events, we lack a unified high-resolution map that can exactly show which areas in the coastlines are at most risk. So due to this, the coastal planners and emergency teams are currently operating under a major. They currently are operating under a major blind spot. So this highlights the need for a consistent physics-based framework. So my first contribution to this project is building an open source framework by using the schism or the semi-implicit cross-scale hydroscience integrated system model. I have ensured that this model is scalable and can be used again. Secondly, I have used an unstructured mesh to capture the complex coastlines of the IOR region. And third, I have built a Python-based processing pipeline so that all the weather and ocean floor datasets can be properly ingested into the schism model. So this is the architecture. Step 2 is integrating the wind and pressure data for dynamic forcing and setting up the boundary conditions. Step 3 is simulating the model for the past cycle. And step 4 is validating those. So these are the data sources that I have used for this project. First is the JEPCO 2024 grid for building the mesh. Next is the ERA 5 reanalysis for wind and pressure data for dynamic forcing. And next is CM EMS global analysis data to set the boundary conditions for baseline sea level and currents. And finally, just UH SLC tide gauge data for validation. It becomes highly detailed. And generating this mesh was the most important part of this project, as without it, the physics for the further simulation would not have worked. So this is the step that it involves testing the model for past cyclones that have occurred in the IOR region, and then later checking the accuracy of the model by comparing it with the actual data from these cyclones. So these are the 4 steps for simulation. So this is the graph I expect will come after I compare the data from the model that I have simulated with the UH data. And the map on the right is to show how the final hazard map looks like. As you can see, the darker regions or brown regions here show the regions which are the most vulnerable or which face the highest risk due to storm surges. So here I have shown how this project can be translated into real world action. So first our model will generate the hazard atlas, which can show how the storm surge show where the storm surge water will go. Then using it, we will overlay the data and population centers to assess the risk and vulnerability. And finally, using that assessment, city planners and engineers can use it for education routes. To conclude, this project has helped me to develop a high resolution validated computer model that can accurately map how storm surges occur in Indian Ocean region. Moving forward, our next immediate step is multi-hazard. This involves combining the storm surge data that I got from this model and combining it with river flooding and sea water level rise to see how they interact with each other. And ultimately, our finding to convert this hazard atlas into an operational early warning system so that we can prevent damage that occurs due to storm surge before it happens. Thank you. Like currently, I am simulating a model for the entire Bay of Bengal region. That is variable depending on the because our coastlines are so intricate. I have used that's why I use the flexible mesh so that it changes the data as per the intricacies of the coastline so that the entire coastline is captured in that. So like I have not exactly fixed a particular length for this data. So like currently I'm still in the validation process. I have not yet got the accuracy, but I have simulated for one cycle and it is pretty accurate right now. So like some of the models that are currently being used are mainly used for like they mainly we use them like after the cyclone hits, then what we can use due to and there are predictive models also. But the advantage of this is that like this is the like those current models only focus on ocean flooding also. I want to include river flooding as well in that. This model is the best. Like I had searched it. So if I want to include compound flooding, that is include both ocean and river flooding, this model is best for that. Because only ocean flooding is not enough to accurately present how much flooding occurs during a cyclone. Because whenever cyclone occurs, there's it's followed by intense rainfall also, and due to that rainfall, rivers also get flooded, and so this model accurately captures both of these parameters.
Biggest flood is reading the rainwater at time. The rainwater is
Here's our canal. Umpteen number of libraries that are available. Now them fit into a specific problem. You have when you have to really use it, like even data when you say, I mean, I've seen invoice data also. Because nobody has used them extensively the way we are using it. So if you don't use it, you won't know what are the gaps in the data. So that's the point. Because unless you keep using that data, you will never know the limitations of the data. I mean, collecting data, dumping it will not help. We need continuous use of that data. Then only we can do. But storms have not stopped.
Yeah.
On ground, you don't see much of difference. Our organization, Google, and organizations like that, they have their own thing. But still, why does it not solve the local problems? That's the point. I mean, sitting in New York or Washington, you can't solve everybody's problems.
I mean, we are starting to done by data collection.
Looking at the local challenges, I mean, identifying the local challenges is very important. That's what we're trying to do. I mean, we can't challenge those. I mean, they are built
Yes.
million dollars, but
Yeah,
putting the
because
local
flooding is not just a process that's affected by one or two parameters. That's why. Yeah.
And then in underwater radiating noise, that element is not there at all. Not there at all.
No, we have to discuss it. I mean, the reason
Yeah.
The current models that I search for, which IMD uses, have this problem. Like, they are also good for prediction, but this like the class I am creating, its purpose is that currently the government is looking to invest in like civil engineering projects. So like we can build underwater tunnels or walls wherever needed, so that this damage can be prevented. So that's why I've included this, so that we can also focus on the river flooding also, along with the ocean one.
Japanese have done a lot of
Japan also, and recently I saw a video that Netherlands have also. I think it's Delta Works or something project. So that also, because they are also very vulnerable to flood, but Netherlands do not get flooded because they have invested on this project.
I visited the Gulf of campaign. There, the government of India is a very ambitious project, and one of the reasons why when he went to the Netherlands, he visited that dive. They want to build a dive in India is proposing to build a dive in the Gulf of Campaign, almost 30-40 kilometers, where there are 6-7 rivers which discharge into the Gulf of Campaign. We can store fresh water in the sea. It's a very ambitious project, and we are right.
Thank you.
Because we wanted to have the monsoon. That's really crazy.
I'm Tulika. I'm from BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus, and my project is passive sonars deployment, and in specifically the effective detection of targets using passive sonar. So, the only way of communication in underwater is by sound waves, because electromagnetic waves don't travel well. So sound waves is the only way. So in that, if we want to not interrupt the ecosystem, or if we want to be stealthy, in that case we use passive sonars. In that, we don't emit sound ourselves, but we just detect what is being transmitted by others. So the source may be a ship, or it might be a mammal. So it would be really helpful if you were to study their migratory patterns or study their other habits as well. So why is this important to do it specifically for the Indian Ocean region, and what challenges we face? So the Indian Ocean region is inhomogeneous, and the temperature and salinity varies quite a lot across depth as well as the range. So because of that, the sound speed profile, which is important when we're looking at sound being detected, changes quite a lot. And not just that, but the seabed parameters also affect the propagation of sound. That's because you have factors such as interference and reflections happening at both the top surface of the water channel as well as the bottom surface. So we need all of that data, which is very vital to calculating, and it is very rich when we look at the Indian Ocean region. So currently, to my knowledge, what is being used is applicable. The model is applicable to temperate waters and not applicable to tropical waters. So we would like to change that and try to find it for tropical waters. So to find the sound speed profile, we will be using TEOS 10, which is UNESCO's the latest software, or rather a calculating system, which uses, instead of using numerical models, it solves differential equations, which is obviously more accurate, and it also has a higher range that it can that is correct for, that it fits for. So we will find accurate sound speed profile and get data for the seabed, so that our transmission loss that we find is accurate. We will have transmission loss because of, well, attenuation factor of the water, attenuation factor of the sea, of the soil, and reflections and interference happen. Yeah, so sound speed profile. So as I said, we used UNESCO's TEOS, and it's a Gibbs seawater specific. It has two models. One is for the ice cap, the tundra region, and the other one is for the seawater that is more applicable to tropical waters. So that is the differential equation that is used. So it takes absolute salinity and conservative temperature, which is better than taking in situation temperatures, because to calculate in situation temperatures, first of all, it's harder to do, and second of all, if we don't do it that way, if we were to take a specific sample of water out of the situation and then calculate it, it changes certain factors, as in the water expands, so a specific volume changes, which would change this sound speed again. So this takes it very accurately. We get the data for temperature and salinity from Copernicus, which gives a more comprehensive region, as in it gives closer to the coastline, so that we can test for shallow waters as well as deep waters. Yes, so this is the sound speed profile that we get for the Arabian Sea region, when this is for the Bay of Bengal region. The gap here is due to landmass being present. So what I have looked into specifically right now is the Kochi coast, and that is because we had the sediment data present for that region. So for accuracy, I used that region. So this is the sound speed profile we get for that region. So what is important to for maximizing the probability of detection of a ship, we'll have multiple factors. And I feel the most prominent factor for that would be transmission loss, among other important things. So transmission loss can be measured using various models. Various models exist already for it, but the better ones that can be used would be Bellhop and RAM. These are also open source, unlike other software that are available. So we can make changes in them as required for our region. Bellhop is, according to my literature review, is used for deep waters and for higher frequency ranges, whereas RAM is used for shallow waters and lower frequency ranges. This is also going to be tested by us and not just depend on the literature review. To find the transmission loss, we will. So what we are going to do is we have to, as we change from frequency and as we change from region, we have to shift from using RAM to using Bellhop, or from using Bellhop to using RAM. So to do that, we need a specific frequency, like a transition frequency, like at this frequency you change the model. So to do that, we need to first see how what resolution it calculates at, so that we get accurate results, and it's not just taking too much time for not too much change in results. So we need a proper convergence plot for every parameter necessary for both the models, and then we will get a computation time versus frequency graph, so that we can find a single frequency, transition frequency from there. This is the convergence plots that we got for RAM. I'll just continue just explaining what horizontal and vertical steps mean in the meantime. So horizontal step will mean, so if you have like a certain region, so you have to get a mesh, like a vertical cross section of it, so that you get like mesh points taking the entire range and the entire depth. So what should be the size of that mesh? The resolution of that mesh is what we want to look at. So this will be the vertical step. DZ is vertical step. So from my conversions process, it says that around 30 would be good, and yes, around 30 would be good, because you can see a 1 plus minus decibel change here. So that would be, and there is not much change in DR. So we take whatever we have minimum standard deviation for, we will consider that as the size. So there is a so this is the conversions plot that we get for RAM. So as you can see, this is the seabed, considered a bathymetry using the Sansvi profile data itself, but it can be refined. So that is what we get. And this is for a lower frequency. This is for a higher frequency. So what happens in shallow regions is that the small region acts as sort of a high frequency cutoff, as a band pass filter for higher frequencies, because of the size of the waveguide and what resonance frequency can be generated. But it is because RAM takes a sediment data which is not available, which is not being considered by bellhop. It is more accurate for shallow water regions. So this is what we get for a higher frequency. As you can see, the amount of transmission loss changes as compared to previous, which is to be expected as frequency increases. For bellhop, we have multiple parameters that we have to consider. So bellhop, what it does is, instead of tracing the entire mesh, entire region, it traces beams. Like it has, that's the physics it uses. It uses different equations. So the number of beams is an important factor. Then the places where our receivers are placed will also be important in that. So the size of that also matters, and the aperture that we're measuring, like the region which would be affected by the transmitter, also matters. Like we can't just take like a 20-degree region by the transmitter and consider that to be the entire region. So we need a convergence for that as well. So from here we get the data for that, and these are all the convergence plots necessary. And this is what we get for bellhop. This is not for bellhop. Yes, it is for bellhop. This is what we get for bellhop. As you can notice here, the amount of transmission loss is significantly less. But this is not accurate for shallow waters. I will explain in a minute. So this is the equation that we use to calculate transmission loss. So when you have a smaller region that you're calculating for, you assume it to be a spherical. Like when you have a wave being transmitted, you assume it to be a sphere that's being transmitted. Like the phase waveform is a sphere. But if you're looking at really large distances, you can approximate it to be a cylindrical spreading, because for a very small region and very long range, it's as close to being cylindrical. So for near field, you expect like the spherical transmission loss, you would expect it as you go down by the depth to be around 32, and like at the furthest point to be 66 decibels something. But this does not consider the amount of attenuation because of the seabed, which is a very, very important factor when it comes to shallow waters. So because bellhop is not too far from the theoretical values, it means that we cannot use it for shallow waters, which is a very important point. Yes, so this is being done just for one region at the moment because of because we don't have enough data for other sedimental regions and lack of time as well. But this can be done for multiple regions so that we get a more comprehensive solution and we can get a better transition frequencies that we require. And not just for shallow water, we also must do it for deep waters. And then the most important question is, how do we calculate probability of detection from just this? So everything necessary to calculate the probability of detection can be compressed into a single formula. So the source level, the noise level, the array gain, and the detection threshold are what the factors are of. Noise level is of the ocean itself, like because of other machines being present or mammals being present, you have a certain amount of noise that is present. So source level and array gain and detection threshold are of either our ship or of the ship that is being detected. So we get that data, and then we get transmission loss from the models we just calculated, and the sediment data, the bathymetry data, and then all that can be gotten from MST, which is important because it updates in real time so that our solution remains consistent no matter what. So it can all be compressed into a single number, which can be then
treat it as a random variable, and then we can get a normal distribution for it, so that we can find the exact probability necessary. So this equation essentially boils down to amount of noise, as in signal to noise ratio, which is if you have more noise than more signal, means your this becomes lower than 50, which means you can't really detect anything. So 50 would mean it's either a ship or it's just noise. Either a target is present or it's just noise. So the higher the signal excess number, the higher and the more positive the signal excess number, the better it is for us, and that will increase our detection probability. So going forward, we need to, so the models I presented were for 50 hertz and for 900 hertz, but we need to do it for all the frequency ranges, which will be generated by the target we're measuring. So we need to do it for all, and we need to find the computation time models as well, so that we can get a transition frequency and then do it for more regions, so that we can verify this and get a more comprehensive look at the solution.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Soham. I'm studying mechanical engineering at BITS Pilani. My project is on passive sonar deployment as well, but my target is the vulnerability assessment. Essentially, the problem that we're trying to solve is finding zones where we can hide from our target. But the project assumes that we don't know where our target is either. So we essentially have two regions. So what it hopes to solve is, from a target region, we can map out into our own region positions that are advantageous for us. That means that we can do surveillance on them, but we are hidden from them. That is where the vulnerability assessment comes into play. And this will be working on detection asymmetry. What detection asymmetry essentially means is, as Tulika explained, signal excess is how we increase our probability of detection. So in positions where our signal excess is lesser than 0, that would mean that there is more noise. And where it is greater, that, and to what extent, that would imply that there is a possible signal there. But detection asymmetry says that there will be variables. Actually, I should have added that earlier. Yes. So these variables, so for example, transmission loss will be the same between 2 points. But the asymmetry comes into part that source level, detection threshold, and array gain. These are three variables that will be dependent on the type of vessel being used. So that can change your signal access and the target signal access. So this is what the whole project revolves around. I could just go back. So before I get into it, I'll discuss some opportunities and relevance. So of course, there is naval offense and defense, and it's an essential tool for anti-submarine warfare. Of course, there are existing tools, but we are trying to work on our own as well. Emerging need as India is shifting from a buyer's navy to a builder's navy in the past decade. So building and working on indigenous tools is necessary. And it may not be a stretch to say that there is some blue economic value to such a project as well, because it is essentially surveillance. So we can take it a step back, and instead of hiding from the target, we will get a map of positions that we can surveil as well. So if there is a high priority asset that we are deploying, we can assess it. So the source level, the detectivity index, or the array gain, and the detection threshold are the three variables that my project will be calculating in-house. And the transmission loss and noise levels are something that the project is going to take in as outside inputs. So for source level, I have chosen Jomopan's Echo, which is a source level model. So why I've chosen this is because it can work on readily available AIS data. So for a proof of concept or for actual value calculation, this is very good. Receiver gain now, array gain usually is calculated assuming anisotropic noise, because ocean noise is anisotropic. But for our first prototype, we have assumed that there is directivity index. That means there is isotropic noise for our receivers. Now, detection threshold is we are basically going to simulate receiver operating curves using statistics. That is how we are going to calculate detection threshold, which will take in probability of detection and probability of false alarm that a operator is willing to take. We'll discuss this further. So yeah, as I said, these are the three things that we'll be calculating in-house. Noise levels are something we'll be taking as an input, and so is the transmission loss. So as I said, detection threshold, we are simulating ROC curves. We are taking the probability of detection, probability of false alarm, the bandwidth, and the integration time that an operator is satisfied with. So this was something that we attempted to do to simulate a noise space, you could say. For example, if this was our receiver, we tried to simulate anisotropic noise, but we're still working on that, so it's not part of the first prototype. So detection threshold, once again, we go over it quickly. You can see wherever there is a high probability of detection, it says 0.9, and a very low probability of false alarm, which is 10 to the power minus 4. You can see the detection threshold is positive. What this essentially means in this equation is that it reduces your signal excess. So that means it's more accurate, but it is less likely to occur. And in cases where we are relaxing our values at the same bandwidth and integration time, we can get a negative detection threshold, which is 0.5 probability of detection and very high probability of false alarm as well. What this would mean is that it will give a lot of false alarms as well. But what this slide is trying to show is that the model can, or the script that we have written can account for both of these cases. Once again, we are going to use the directivity index for our prototype. We are going to use simple equations from Urich's textbook, Principles of Underwater Sound. And for source level, we are using Jumopan's echo using AIS data. And for vessels or types of vessels that we don't have AIS data for, of course, we don't have data for every vessel that we are going to target or the target is going to be. So we have taken these values from Xavier Lawton's textbook, which are for your source level itself. Now, once again, some key advantages and features. It is multi-platform because we can take in different vessels as our source level. Depending on that, the script that we have written can account for these variabilities. So it is multi-platform and risk-based, as I showed in the detection threshold. Depending on what kind of risk the operator is satisfied with, what their vessel's capabilities is to detect these and to act upon these, they can choose their own detection threshold. So far, what we've been able to achieve is a complete backend of the detection threshold, source level, and directivity index, which is the RA again. And we have a script that can take in these values and generate a final comma separated value output that can further be plotted into our advantageous zones in our own region and in the target region. But one thing that such a binary output would be missing out on is sensitivity analysis, which is some of the next steps, because your increase from the signal excess or closeness to the signal excess is also important. So if your signal excess is 0, 1 decibel, 2 decibels, 15 decibels, it brings out variability and sensitivity that we have not accounted for over here. And of course, one of the other steps could be to change your directivity index into the realistic array gain that we are trying to do. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anupam Sahai, and I'm pursuing BE in Mechanical Engineering from BITS Pilani campus. And I'll be presenting my project, which is an API service for potential phishing scores. The challenge is that the ocean data is a very massive data set, and using GIS, existing GIS polygon math is very heavy and takes a lot of time. Also, when using this platform, normally users want multiple parameters to change, and hence the current API service is very slow for that. So what I've achieved with this is creating a GraphQL schema, which uses, instead of using regular polygon math, it uses Uber's H3 indexes and stores
location values as strings. I am using Flask. It is hosted on Flask, and I'm using Postgres for the database because it's already pre-existing in the marine spatial planning framework. And the output would be a structured JSON file, which can be forwarded to the front end. So for the opportunities, this can create a sub-second responses for fish adversaries. This API is reusable and can be easily changed for different projects by giving different inputs and changing slightly the schema which is provided. This is also providing a JSON file output, and and the API is hosted on Flask, which will ultimately be implemented in a web-based framework. I'm using GraphQL, Strawberry GraphQL for the schemas in the backend. For the storage, I'm using Postgres SQL and H3Py, which is to convert the location into hexagonal strings, which can be easily accessed. And of course, I'm using Postman for verification. So I'll be explaining each and every one of these just why I've chosen these and what's the benefit of this. So Flask is a minimal Python web framework, and so it uses less memory and is good in this case because it can directly give the queries to the GraphQL schema and not use the database. Not interfere with the database. GraphQL is a query language which is being used to run the API. It'll create the schema, and the benefit of this over the one we are already using is that this has a single endpoint and can use multi-filtering so that the data that the user wants is the only data that is supplied to him or her. So there's no excess data that is being conveyed, which reduces the time and that's the thing. And reduces the bandwidth, especially from SATCOM at sea. Right. Slide which was comparing both of them. So I've also shown in the slides, which is an example query. So what it ideally shows is by changing a few inputs, by changing what you want, you can just change the variables that you'd like, and nothing else in the schema has to change, and you can get multiple inputs just by one simple query. So that's the benefit of using GraphQL over like the REST API, which was there previously. And I'm using Postgres SQL as the backbone for the storage. This was because it is already implemented and is fast and convenient for join queries. For the database itself, instead of making one table with many variables, I have made parallel tables with same primary keys and different parameters. So this ideally means that if there are 5 parameters that are needed for potential fishing zones, there will be 5 tables with the same primary keys, which will be the H3 index, ID for the location. There'll be the date, and there'll also be the depth. So by just giving one of these, all of these, you can find all of these variables with just a simple join. This also helps in troubleshooting if there will be issues. It's easier to troubleshoot when you know exactly which table is faltering, and hence I've used parallel systems instead of just a single one. There's another slide which shows the expected database tables and output variables. So I'll just tell the variables which are there, which is the temperature. There's sea surface temperature. There's P. There's oxygen, and there's nitrate. I'm using H3 spatial indexing, which
which ideally breaks the area down into hexagons. And instead of using GIS data, which will use very highly accurate region, this will not use that, and instead just divide it into hexagons, which will help in finding the neighboring one as well, because these are all same hexagons. And it's faster because we are storing it as a string and not going through point and polygon method, which will look through the entire database row by row, finding whether this data is between this and this. Yeah, so the indexing strategy, as I told you, you will select ideally in the front end a polygon. This will get resolved into H3 cell IDs. This can be used, this will be given to the backend by the schema which I'm creating through GraphQL, which will create a where query, which will get the data and it will be returned to the front end. Which will be helpful in validation of this. This will create. This can be used to check if my queries are accurate and if it's giving the result that I wanted. So the postman would ideally would take input from the client and give it to the Flask framework. Then it would be given to the GraphQL, which will give the schema and will give it to the backend, get the data, and give it back to the front end. So I had shown a slide which was the expected schema, which shows which variables are changing and what is the expected output. So the results of this is that I've achieved a very fast API because of indexing methods that have evolved. This also reduces time for searching a particular region in the database as well. And it's a scalable architecture, which means it can be used for other projects as well. Yeah, future improvements include implementation of this on the marine spatial planning framework, and also implementing a caching system. That's it. Thank you.
Yeah. So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ayush Shukla, and my project is about inland navigability assessment of the Brahmaputra River. And some more background about me. So, I'm currently pursuing my bachelor's in engineering, particularly in electronics and instrumentation. So, by Brahmaputra. So, Brahmaputra is a very unique river, and it was declared as a national waterway in the 80s. So it's a huge stretch of water. It's around 900 kilometers. It starts all the way from Sadia in east till Dhubri in west. So it starts from the Myanmar, close to Myanmar border in the east region, all the way till Bangladesh border. Is on average throughout its length, it's around 5 kilometers wide. So it's very wide, and it's not a single channel. The entire river, the channel is very braided in nature. So the ships right now can't really navigate this corridor easily because of constant sedimentation. I mean, the river has the second highest sedimentation load in the entire world, and the discharge rate in the river is also pretty huge. It's the seventh largest discharge rate. It's the seventh largest river in the world by discharge rate, and the largest in India as well. So very tough to navigate for ships. So some sort of framework is needed which would unify sedimentation and the discharge rates and make something accessible for all the ships to navigate this river. So the main beneficiaries of this project, firstly, the Inland Waterways Authority of India. So right now what they do is to make the entire corridor navigable. They spend a lot of resources on dredging the river and make it navigable for ships without having a concrete idea on where to dredge and how much to dredge. So if there was some sort of framework that would help them to know okay, these are the areas where the sedimentation load is high, so you need to dredge here. So something like that would help them. Apart from that, of course, the vessel operators that operate in the region, so they would help with some sort of map that would let them know that sandbars have shifted by this. And so this would help them as well. Defense, search and rescue.
is also prone to flooding, especially during monsoon regions in India, and it does not use classical indices to differentiate water from land, since the water in Brahmaputra is very turbid. So we had to come up with our own indices to differentiate water and land. Also, we also make use of elevation-derived bathymetry as one of our data points. I'll come to the methodology of how we are collecting data and where it is exactly being used. Also, this is one of our deliverables. We are delivering something called as a cost map for the Indian Waterway Authority of India. So I'll come to what this is in a moment. Providing some context, the work has been done in Europe and China as well, but we can't take their work directly for our purposes because their rivers aren't like Brahmaputra. The rivers are usually a single channel, and the discharge rate simply and the sedimentation load simply is not that much. So similar work has been done for Indian waterways in other countries, but we can't just adapt it for our own purposes. So we had to somehow build a model on top of the work that has been done earlier. So coming to the methodology, so what essentially we are doing is we are dividing the entire river into grids. So the entire river is divided into grids, and since you are dividing the entire river into a grid, this is basically an occupancy grid. So each point on that grid has a certain cost attached to it. That cost is basically just a numerical analogy for how difficult it is for a ship to navigate on that point. So let's say the point is a vegetated island. So a ship can't go on that island. It has to flow on water. So the cost attached to that point would be 255, which is the maximum in an 8-bit system. And 0 essentially would indicate a very low cost. So that would be open waters. So essentially, we are delivering a cost map for the entire river. To develop these cost maps, we are using satellite data, particularly from Sentinel-2, and we are segmenting the entire river using image segmentation models into 5 different classes. The classes being open waters, shallow waters, mud flats, sand beds, and vegetation. So once we divide the entire river into these 5 classes, and also further then we use bathymetry data as well of the river. So combining these two data, we are abstracting away raw data into costs for each grid point. And now since we have cost, we can also provide route planning for our ships. So that is also within the scope of our project. We have also done route optimization for ships as well. This is some details about the image segmentation that we performed on satellite data. So as I mentioned, there were 5 classes, and we used a unit model to segment the data, and we ran multiple times to achieve the maximum accuracy. So the data set was manually annotated by myself to create different classes, and there were auto-labeled data as well, which kind of used a refractive index of the light to differentiate between water and land. So that was the auto-labeled data, and so the best accuracy that we achieved was in run 3, when it was a mix of manually labeled annotations and auto-generated annotations. So just something about that. This is the result that we obtained. This is basically the segmented map. So you could see this is basically monsoon versus post-monsoon. So you can see how the channel changes from monsoon to post-monsoon. That is why the Brahmaputra requires studies across various times in the year, because a single study gets outdated very quickly in this region because of moving sandbars. So you can see not a lot of sandbars are there during monsoon period when the river is at its peak. But post-monsoon, on November, the river has kind of gotten milder, and you could see the braided nature of it is much more visible. So this was one of the outputs that we obtained. Yeah. So this is just our pipeline in pictures. So what we did, so this is particularly for the post-monsoon period. We did this, and we did the entire thing for 3 cycles: pre-monsoon, monsoon, and post-monsoon. So this is for the monsoon cycle. So first we generated the segmentation map. So it has basically divided the entire river into these 5 classes. After we generated the cost map, so basically the red, it's a linear scale between green to red. So the red indicates high cost and green indicates low cost. So you could see the river channel being labeled as green. After that, the work is still pending there, but you could see the route is more or less taking through the braided natures of Brahmaputra, and it is still work in progress, but this will hopefully we'll get better results. So moving forward, so this is what we have done in this project. I've explained most of this already. Some future integrations that can be built on top of this project is instead of having fixed maps for different periods of the year, you could have some sort of live map that are constantly updated through satellite data. So you can use Sentinel-1, which provides you SAR data, and you can constantly poll the data from satellite and have a live map that updates constantly. And you could probably then use, publish this live to AIS of multiple ships. So this would provide as an aid to navigation for them. You could also build an autonomous vessel navigation stack. You can go into that as well. You'll have to install sensors on board and some sort of LiDAR sensors or stereo cameras, and you can do that as well. So this is an interesting prospect which can be looked into. D-Star, this is also route planning. Once you go into local navigation, you can implement all sorts which would help the ship navigate locally instead of having just a global map. But for me was in the image segmentation, if I could go to that slide. Okay, we can use this. So there were 5 classes. So basically there was this one class of mud flats which was not being labeled properly, and I reached the conclusion that it was because of not enough data points being available for that. So what I did was I went back and I tried to find images which had more apparent mud flats, right? To, my model could learn that how mud flats look like. So I did that, and it performed slightly better after that, but still a lot more data is needed for it to perform. So I trained the model locally on my system. I have a GPU RTX 4060. So I trained it locally, and the actual model is it's not that big. The model, the data set was quite big. So the tiles itself, the physical tiles, all of the tiles were approximately 800 MB per tile.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Krishna Kishore. I'm doing mechanical engineering at BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus. So my project here was numerical modeling of shoreline erosion in the Konkan coast. So I'll walk you through, in this presentation, I'll walk you through the problem and then the critical gaps we found in the current research and why Konkan coast is a challenging coast to deal with. And then the proposed modeling framework we did, and then the way forward and the impact we expect to have on society. So let's talk about the problem. 4. Okay, so the Konkan coast is a 720 kilometer coast along the Arabian Sea. Though it's such a massive coast, there's like 0 published numerical models which deals with wave dynamics, sediment transport, and shoreline retreat. So even like meanwhile, it supports massive fishing communities. It has a major port infrastructure. The Konkan Railway runs near the coast, and it has a lot of mangrove estuaries too. So the Konkan coast faces like intense monsoons during June to September. It is like the most energetic monsoon, the wave period experienced by like any Indian coast. So like the coastal managers do not have any tool to like predict the erosion or like build bridge waters and sea walls to prevent those. So those are the gaps we'll be addressing here. These are the main 4 gaps. As I said, there's no like proper calibrated model. There's only like remote sensing data available on current research. And number 2, there's no wave monitoring network, unlike Europe or North America. So we have to rely only on global reanalysis data from ERA 5 or wave watch 3. There's no proper local data. And number 3, there's no spatially continuous hazard map classifying the zone into low erosion, medium erosion, high erosion zones, which is like necessary for land use planning. And number 4, the southwest monsoon. As I told before, it experiences the most energetic wave period Indian coastline experiences. The southwest monsoon, like along the monsoon, the waves like are not unidirectional. They are bidirectional. They turn by 180 degrees, basically. So you have to consider all these gaps. This will be our approach in solving this. So before we model the coastline, we should first of all understand the coastline. The Konkan coast has like 3 major characteristics. The first is the wave climate. As I told before, like it experiences huge waves of 2 to 4 meters, extending 10 to 16 seconds during the southwest monsoon. And number 2, the morphology. The Konkan coast is not just an uniform sandy beach. It has a lot of rocky headlands. It has narrow beach pockets, which are like 20 to 80 meters. And it also has a lot of estuarine embayments. So like it makes it very complex to predict the wave shore behavior. And number 3 is sediment dynamics. Seasonal rivers called nullas, like they run only during the monsoon. Say they dump a lot of sediment during monsoons, and they run dry during the rest of the year. So like any model that fails to like address these 3 characteristics will fail on the coast. So this is our proposed framework. So first we'll be collecting data from Sentinel-2 satellite, and we'll be modeling that on QGIS. And number 2, we'll be collecting the wave climate hindcast data from ERA 5 and wave watch 3. And number 3, we'll be collecting the bathymetry data and topography data from GEPCO and NHO charts. And number 4 is the engineering core, where we'll be modeling the sediment transport and shoreline retreat on Mike Zero suit, which has like lit line and lit drift to model these. And finally, we'll be making a hazard zone map, which categorizes the area coast into low erosion, medium, and high erosion zones. So this is the whole shoreline we've taken. This consists almost like 7 to 80 kilometers from Ratnagiri to Vijaydurg. Because like you can't be modeling 720 kilometers at a time. We've like divided into parts. And this is the expected final result, which is not yet made. The dark purple shows like it's a high erosion zone, and as it gets lighter, it's a low erosion zone. And these are the tools and data sources we are using. So for modeling, we'll be using lit drift and lit line from Mike Zero. And like we've been facing like licensing issues, so actually switching to XBeach on that. And the nearshore wave transformation will be done on Mike 21 spectral wave. The data are collected from these satellite imagery was collected from Sentinel-2. The climate handcast was collected from ERA 5. And we are currently collecting the bathymetry data from GEPCO and NHO charts. And we are using in-course BIOS to validate data wherever it's necessary. So this was the discretized shoreline we made on QGIS. That's the shoreline. It was given like 300 meters breakwater. And then this is the transects. This is like a few years of shorelines merged to like show you the difference. And like with this, we'll be able to see which way the shoreline is eroding, basically. Like these are 3 different models. It's not the same scale. So this is the shoreline. And then we make a 300-meter gap on both sides, and then we make transients. These are from different years, but these are not the same models. You make all 3 for all 5 years. We collect the climate data from ERA 5 using this code, and this is the visual imagery of that. And this is the expected deliverable. So we'll be making the first validated coastal erosion hazard map for the Konkan coast, which will divide the coast into low, medium, and high erosion zones. This will help you in decision support. Like you can evaluate how the sea walls or breakwaters perform before building them. This was actually a problem in Tamil Nadu. And then hazard zoning, like I said, it will be useful for land use planning. And number 3, scenario planning. Coastal managers can predict how this shoreline is going to retreat or the sea level is going to change before it happens. And this is the way forward. So we've acquired satellite imagery and modeled them on QGIS. And then we've compiled the waveset data. Right now we are setting up the Mike Zero environment to model the everything. And finally, we'll be delivering the hazard map with proper validation. So this framework is not necessarily just meant for Konkan coast. It is applicable for any coast with data scarcity in the tropical waters. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we haven't included the monsoon asymmetry yet. So we have taken year-wise data so far, 2025, 2024. I'm planning to take month-wise data to so that you could include monsoon asymmetry in the data itself.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. So my name is Pranav. I'm a mechanical engineering student at BITS Pilani, Goa campus. My project it was essentially AI-assisted dredging assessment for the IOR ports and overall the coastlines itself. And yeah, so first of all, we'll see what is the problem with dredging, especially in IOR. We can see that dredging market is growing yearly, it's predicted to be growing linearly in the coming years. Dredging is a very monopolized market in India, at least. Only DCI and Adani groups have control over it, and we don't have a proper assessment model for the whole thing. We just accept whatever is done and we move on. So first of all, why no one has attempted to make a unified model is because every port, every region has different characteristics, and also it needs to be done in large scale. Might take 10 years or more. And for now, what we are doing is a reactive procurement. We find the port is not able to enter, ships are not able to enter the ports, and then we just start the dredging processes randomly. And no tool optimization. We choose according to availability, not optimized in an optimized method. And the cost is not mapped at all most of the time. So just to show that there are two main rivers that deposit in the or help in the sedimentation rate in the port, Peria River and I forgot the name of it, but yeah. So the data needed, we need bathymetry, we need dredging records. I still didn't get dredging records. I still didn't get this. Incoys, I contacted CPA and I tried getting from Incoys, but both didn't so far let me know. So far, only the only data I got or I interpolated from was satellite imagery and whatever Telemac had, could do. So this is only satellite data was free. Obviously, I used Google Earth Engine for for extracting the tidal waves and tidal wave data and the wind data. This is just, as I said before, why it's important. And it's heavily dependent on monsoon. Monsoon heavily affects the sedimentation rate over there. So yeah, so far what is being done? It's supposed to be a 4-layer project, but so far only 3.5 has been done because the lack of data. So these are the number of nodes in the Telemac mesh. Telemac is the physics engine I used. It was only open source, so that was only feasible one. 13 months. Ideally, I think by tomorrow or day after tomorrow, I'll be done with around 60 months, meaning 5 years. So far, 13 months have been fused. SPM is the suspended particle, suspended sediment, something. Yeah. So the reason I need the dredging records is for coupling in layer 3, from layer 1 to layer 3, for feeding the ML model and training it. I need labels and inputs. So this is the general framework. So these are the tools used. most of the work was done in through WSL. I used Telemac, Open Telemac for the processing, and IPOBO for the boundary segmentation. Google Earth Engine, Sentinel-2, and yeah, these two are the main data sources for me. These are the libraries, etc. used. And yeah, so I used ERA5 data to also, and but I could not get the wind data because it was very noisy, because it was very not accurate. So I need to check into other sources. I tried contacting Aviso to get a reply, and yeah, the others. This is what is being done so far. So this is the general mathematic portfolio so far that I built. You can see the color scheme and how much is the general depth and shallowness of the port. So this is the port mainly. So here it starts. And it's not very clear because of, again, the noise. The noise is very high in it's the port itself was very cloudy, like very cloudy throughout the year. All of this is mostly noise. The noise affects the whole sedimentation portfolio, but the masking was done perfectly because it was more of estimations of the map. And yeah, this is the noise levels. Fused SPM. So this is throughout the. I took one single year and not 12 months, and I saw how the turbidity and the bathymetry is there for 1 year, and this is the SPM of one whole year. We can see that it increases, it decreases till Jan, and then starts increasing and till April. Okay, and this is again why I cannot find a complete data set, like, because I'm not able to complete the whole process because of invalid data sets and incomplete data sets. Yeah, so initially I had not included the Perrier inlet for considering the tidal effects, but slowly after the Cron deposition rate I included, and it gave a different output. This is purely but just by the Perrier reverse effects, just the sedimentation rate due to Perrier river. It's quite high. Initially, yeah, and I had to recalibrate it. So my model gave that it will be around 390. I think the volume was 390. But the estimated, the actual was around 24. Yeah, 24. So I had to go through why and the reasoning. Reasoning was mostly because most of it was not dredged, and some of it was left as tolerance. Some of it was left as manageable and pushed away, not instead of dredging. So after going through all those tolerances, I reached 24. This was more done more with research. This was the output that the physics engine gave, and yeah, it was fine for most parts of the inlets. The approach, Ernakulam and Matanchery, are the two inlets. So this is a decision dashboard. Decision dashboard is it's very actually there was a study conducted in 2017 called FERCAT study something. They had already estimated how much will be the dredged amount that will be done. So that was the only data that I could use to calibrate my physics engine or teach it. That was the only data that I could find for the whole 60 years or something. So the data needed to go to make it more of a predictive analysis. I need CPA's data, bathymetric surveys. I need its wave data. So I got only so far tidal data. I didn't get the wave data because wave data is more dynamic and changes with every time period. So I need wave data specifically. I need the SPM cubes, multiple year SPM cubes that I can build. So yeah, wave forcing. And the river discharge rate is also not very clear. So that also I need to get into. So this is a predicted timeline. If all the data is completed, hopefully we can move on to the next port. We need to see. So far I have just I don't have a predictive model. So far I just have a decision support baseline. So this can only give me, they can currently assess how much is the dredging done accurate or not, with more training and more tinkering. But for that, for accurate results and predictive analysis, I need the CPA data and wave data, rainfall and river discharge for better. They are using physics in football. Even now, I think over the Yangtze River also using physics. Like regularly, they're using physics. They're still not gone to the. I'm not pretty sure there are more papers on the predictive analysis yet, but most countries, even country in Norway, I forgot the rivers, but it was also using dredging. Physics engines for dredging and analyzing current. So if we are able to complete this model for complete the proper model and then move on to the AI, the ML part, the predictive part, then it will be very helpful. Our sediment transport pattern is very different.
Yeah, so that's what I'm asking. Like, can it? That's we want an accurate one. Then we definitely need data.
We need data.
So,
So we need to do. So there is another project which is trying to study sediment transport pattern using satellite.
Yes.
So that all that will get combined with this.
Yes.
So I mean, these are separate components being built, and then they will get combined. So I mean, we have Romit who's the civil engineer from IIT Delhi. He's also doing his PhD there. He has been working on this for the last 5 years. So because sediment management is required across various applications: river management, port management, coastal management, even flooding and erosion also requires. So, this is a very fundamental work because it talks about the sediment, how the removal is being done. This is focused only on the dredging part. Pre-post dredging, no data is there. How will you even ensure that dredging? I mean, the richest Bombay are the ones who are involved in this.
That's what I just told them.
So,
I was attending a conference on dredging, and the 111 rivers have been declared as national waterways. 111. Now, you need to dredge 5 meters, at least the channel, for it to become navigable for a passenger as well as cargo. Now you can imagine the length of the total network is almost more than 20,000 kilometers. Right? There is 111 rivers. Now, if you need to dredge it, and where do you dispose it? That's one huge challenge. How do you dispose that dredge debris? Because otherwise they will not become navigable. Now it's a massive opportunity which is actually not being addressed at all anywhere in the country. So we see it as an opportunity. I mean, we've been propagating this that the students and all, everyone should be addressing it because it has to be done. You know, UP is landlocked. Sorry, sir, I guess is landlocked, and the only way, the cheapest way to, I mean, which we have been using for thousands of years, is the river. Ganga is the national waterway number one. Now, if we can't dredge it, I mean, there was a pilot which was sent a tourist. It got. So how do you do it? I mean, if like the best minds in the country are not addressing this problem, how will that become an opportunity? That is, so we need to address this. Yeah, this is all connects. It's all converged, man. Just 700 years ago, man, trading with Kerala, they would go by coastal boats and use the weather systems to choose the window, time window, and all this was happening. All that traditional knowledge also is being lost. That's why we are like getting students from the liberal arts also to come and populate so much of. People were trading with Indonesia. The Bali Jatra is the biggest festival in Qatar. Even today, we are trading with Indonesia. 2,500 years ago, they would use I had been there to Bali Jatra for the festival. the first Kartik Purnima, the first full moon after Diwali, is when they launched their voyages. And currents were taking them. So all this knowledge was there. It's a civilizational knowledge which we need to retrieve or whatever we can if we can. So we need students from so many disciplines to come and all the data will converge actually one day. So we have carried elephants on those boats. There are records that we have carried. So you can imagine the stability of those boats and to Indonesia. If you carry an elephant to Indonesia is.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanchit Agarwal, currently pursuing chemical engineering from BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus. So my project is titled Monsoon-Driven Seasonal Forcing of Marine Biofouling in Indian Ocean Region. So before I begin, let me briefly explain what biofouling is. So whenever ships stay under seawater for a long period of time, certain organisms such as algae, barnacles start sticking to the surface, and over time it grows thicker, which increases the drag which ships face, and which leads to higher fuel consumption and frequent cleaning. So the main objective of my project is to understand how monsoon changes biofouling rates. So while I was going through existing literature, I found few research gaps. First was that most of the research was focused on specific season or had a very short deployment period. Since biofouling is a continuous process, I feel it is important to simulate it for a long period of time. And second was, well, most of the studies focus on biofouling as a whole, but not focuses on each stage of biofouling, which stage is being affected at each level. And most existing literature is descriptive. As such, there is no model to predict the biofouling. And also, there was ship cleaning is mostly based on time intervals, not on environmental conditions. So my long-term goal was to create a model which can help ship cleaning based on environmental conditions. So what unique contributions from my side is, instead of looking biofouling as a whole, I use 5 stages of biofouling and use different equations for each of them. And for that, instead of using keeping environmental conditions constant, I used environmental factors like temperature, nutrients, sunlight, water movement, and larval supply chains from websites like Copernicus and NASA. I also created Latin hypersampling to create a data set for random forest training. And this model can help us show which timing colonization changes. So my methodology was, I used physics simulator. For all 5 stages, I used RK45 method to solve the ODs. Then I created 30,000 different data set using Latin hypersampling, and finally the random forest model was trained for surrogate modeling. So these are the equations I used. These equations have been taken from well-established literatures. These are the 5 stages of biofouling. First is condition filming. This is an organic layer which starts developing as soon as the ship is dipped under it enters the seawater. Second is biofilm initiation. It's where bacteria starts attaching to the surface. Third is biofilm maturation. It is when biofouling matures. The bacteria which has attached matures. Fourth is microfouling, which includes attaching of organisms like algae. Final is the macrofouling, which focuses on barnacle and mussels. And as I said, instead of as monsoon changes the factors, monsoon changes the factors as temperature rises before the monsoon, then decreases during the rainy season, and gradually recovers that. And at the same time, shear stress is peak during monsoon season. So I took real data from Copernicus and websites. One of the main questions is, does season in which colonization start affects biofouling? So for that, I simulated 4 seasons in which biofouling starts: southwest monsoon start, pre-monsoon, winter, and post-monsoon. So as you can see, post-monsoon, when biofouling starts, it peaks relatively faster to others because it already has the nutrients available for that. As compared to that pre-monsoon, because during during monsoon, the water movement increases. It reestablishes the cycle of growth. So then I finally used R-square method to check the fit, and I found pretty good fit for drag and macro falling density. And so this is the conclusion and future scope. Key findings was that the season in which colonization starts matters because eventually they reach same peak, but the time it takes changes significantly. And monsoon does not simply increase or decrease fouling, but it rebuilds the pattern of cycle growth, disruption, and recovery. The surrogate model successfully reproduced the key simulations. Limitations of my was is key. I used real data, but whenever it was not available, I used synthetic data using average of all. And the equations I used was from published literature. And in my model, I don't consider the ship has been cleaned in between. And future scope is we can integrate this model with ship performance and fuel to recommend optimal cleaning schedules, and it can be validated using biofouling observations from field deployments. Thank you.
So hello everyone, I'm Siddharth and I'm pursuing mathematics and computer science in BITS Pilani, Hyderabad. And so I'll be continuing off of his presentation. So basically what biofouling is it's the growth of these biological organisms on the ships and oil rigs or any kind of marine structures, right? So we are trying to model biofouling as a part of these 5 stages that we've classified the biofouling into, and we've assigned a differential equation to each stage, and we're looking at biofouling as these 5 stages and we're analyzing it. So my project is to do parameter sensitivity analysis of basically trying to understand which factors are important to the growth of these organisms and why they do affect it, and which factors affect which stages of the biofouling as well. So why do we need to study this, right? Biofouling has costed the global economy around $30 billion in just higher fuel use and maintenance and dry docking. So that's a lot of money, and it needs to be dealt with. Along with that, it can also push penalties to around 80%, where it can cause friction and it can cause like changes in temperature as well, which affect the performance of the ships and oil rigs. Another thing is Indian Ocean waters have not been studied that much, right? And our biofouling rate is around 2 to 4 times compared to international waters. So it's important to study the Indian Ocean region particularly. And there's also a model gap where not many differential equation models have been made, and they haven't quite gone into this part of the literature. So what I am trying to do is I'm trying to model this biofouling mathematically and apply a statistical method called global Sobol Salitelli analysis, where this is a statistical method that gives me a matrix saying this factor is more important than the other. So that's a mathematical method that I'm using to analyze these differential equations. And not only that, but I'm doing a one at a time analysis where I'm studying each of them specifically as well to get a complete picture of what's going on. So after doing all of this, my eventual goal is to make a sensitivity matrix which can be used as weights for machine learning models subsequently. So along with that, not only the 5 differential equations and one at a time analysis, I've also included these 3 factors which are more real life related, right? So in a lab, you don't usually experience this, but in real life, what happens is the nutrients can sometimes penetrate through the layers of biofouling, and that affects how they grow and different species have different growth rates and stuff. And another thing is substrate inhibition due to pollution in the waters. So depending on how polluted the waters are or what is there in the water, sometimes the substrates are inhibited and the biofouling doesn't happen as it should. So that's also a factor I'm considering. And another thing is biofouling is not a it's not a static process. It's very dynamic. So what happens is oftentimes species compete for space, and that can result in changes in growth rates and stuff. So these are the factors I'm considering, and I've done the analysis, and I've calculated two key metrics. So one is thermal performance penalty, and the other is hydraulic friction penalty. So as the names say, they're penalties that increase temperature or friction, and that cause economic burden to the ships. Yeah, so this is the methodology I've used. So first, you change the parameters. You apply a plus minus 20% to give it a error, and then you calculate constants, and then eventually these are used to run the models, and then calculate coefficients after. Right now, these are just dummy results that have been calculated using like an 80,000 data set data. But the thing is, it depends on what kind of ship it is, or what kind of, if it's static or dynamic. So I can't really show you the exact results, but because we've considered like how the ship is moving, the ship speed, and what kind of water it is as well. But this is roughly how it's going to look, and this is a factor that goes from 0 to 1, and where 1 being it is more important than the others. Also performed one at a time analysis, where looking at them in each stage, as he's already explained. So each stage, so it forms a conditional film first, and then slowly it builds over that. So another key insight that this gives us is so the hard macrofouling is the thing that causes the most penalties. So the stage 5 until stage 4, it's very gradual. But as soon as the hard macrofouling starts, the penalties shoot up abnormally. So this is where we have to tackle the issue. So yeah, the deliverables that I've produced are the sensitivity matrix and a heat map, and these can be used to do more elaborate and specific field campaigns eventually. And yeah, this is used to train their models that they've made. And yeah, also coming to the limitations, the models are obviously not perfect. The statistical methods have this limitation where if it assumes that every single parameter that we've considered is independent of each other. So that might not be the case sometimes, and that can lead to some errors or problems. Yeah.
How are you?
There's another set of 13 projects under the IIT. So they also different add up other aspects. In biofouling, there are 3 projects there.
Yeah. So all of our projects are a little bit predictive models only. So mine is the actual predictive model that we are working on, and I'm trying to use it in like actual stuff. So hello everyone, myself Harshal Gode. I'm from BITS Pilani, Pilani campus, and I'm doing mechanical engineering there. This is my project is surrogate modeling of the biofouling process. So as they explained what is biofouling is and all. So our temperatures are higher, our metabolic activity is higher, everything that. Then our biofilms, they form in like 2 to 3 days compared to 5 to 7 days in the temperate regions. So that is a big thing. And our current solutions are, so there was a anti-fouling paint that we were using, but it was toxic for the environment, right? So it was banned everywhere. Then, but some ships are still using that. But what currently the fleets and ship managers follow is that they just dry dock on fixed calendar schedules. But for Indian regions, that is
not really applicable because our biofouling occurs very fast. Like it is 2 to 3 times of the temperate regions. So we need a proper predictive system for that. As I explained, the 5 stages, and these are like based on chemistry and biological process, but they are using different ordinal equations that we are mapping using normal calculations. I'll explain them in depth here. So the conditioning film, in that organic molecules adsorb onto the hull. They use Langmuir adsorption kinetics. That is its own differential equation. So all of them have their differential equation as you saw in this. The second one is bacterial adhesion. So the conditioning film that previously was there, the bacteria adhesion tries to adhere. And this is where we introduce the wall shear stress. So basically, what this means is, as the shear stress is directly proportional to wall shear stress, shear stress is directly proportional to the speed of our ship, right? So therefore, the ship speed is inversely proportional to the probability the bacteria is adhering. So that is what is shown here. Now the stage 3, the bacteria now secretes a EPS matrix, and that is followed by monode kinetics. Now that is where algae will be attracted to that EPS matrix, and then this will form like a muck and visible muck. Before nothing was visible; that there were just slime layers. Now everything will be visible. This is also this will create the weight of the ship, which add more weight to the ship. Then finally the macrofouling. This is the most important part, and this is what we want to predict, because here the exponential drag spikes up to 55%, and we want to clean at this stage possibly. So we need to create that. Yeah. So one of the fourth stage is using this Liebig's law. So this equation I'll explain. So basically, in this, that is a rate of biofouling only. So this is co-limited by 2 terms. There is one nutrient term and there is a light intensity term. So whichever is less, it will choose that. Then we introduce the Q10 factor here. So the Q10 factor is basically after every 10 degrees Celsius to the reference temperature. The reference temperature is 20 degrees from the temperate process. So after every 10 degrees Celsius, we multiply this whole equation by Q10. And our Q10 was in general around 2 or 2.1 or something. That was from research papers that I found. Yeah, so we created a data set. Now we mapped the physics model. We had the old ordinary differential equation as a physics simulator. Then we used that to get the data set using Latin hypercube sampling. But this data set is like default values. It is uniformly spread out. But what we want is each parameter is sensitized, right? Each parameter has different sensitivity. So that I'll get data from his model, the parameter sensitivity, and then I'll get better model for the ML model to train, better data. And these are the 5 inputs that will generate from the data. Then I trained that data on the random forest surrogate model, and I'm getting a very good response time to that. So yeah, so some of the outputs were biofilm thickness, microfouling, macrofouling, and then drag increase, all those, right? But the biofilm thickness and microfouling were kind of failing because they form very early in the stage and they get saturated very quickly. Like in 5 days only, the whole biofilm forms. But we can't predict it because there is almost no variance in the data. So, but this is commercially irrelevant because the ships aren't going to dry dock in 4 or 5 days. They'll need like at least 90 days or something to dry dock. So our model is working very good for the 90 days parities, and it is almost working flawlessly. These are the R-square values of the drag increase and macrofouler densities. So I wanted to integrate this static model. So there's a static model and there's a dynamic model. I'll explain that. So the static model is basically for the ports. So what it assumes is it takes 5 inputs, and at the end of 90 days, it will assume that the ship was in this same environment for whole the 90 days and then same speed. But that is not what really happens. I'll explain that later. So I'm using the static model for MSK integration. So I wanted to create a like a heat map of where are the hotspot of biofouling and all. So what I did is I took data maps, like satellite data maps from Copernicus, and I used the surrogate model and to calculate the rate of biofouling heat map. So the inputs were sea surface temperature, then nitrate concentration, then larval supply, then solar irradiance. Solar irradiance, I didn't really need data. I just simulated it using solar zenith angle model. That is way easier to do. Then this is the heat map I'm getting. So you look that in tropic region, there is a lot more biofouling, right? But this is a lot sensitized by sea surface temperature. But then I'll get the sensitivity rank matrix from him. Then I'll know which parameter is more working, and then they'll map out properly to get a better heat. Yeah, so the dynamic model that I talked about. So the ships, they don't generally stay at a single port for 90 days, right? They move places, they have routing, they have to do stuff. So for the dynamic model, it will assume that if we will give it a timeline of the ship's route. So like at timestamp 1, timestamp 1, 2, then it will calculate the speeds. Then the model will take the environmental parameters from whatever timestamp it is there. Then it will try to calculate the final biofouling, and it will plan a schedule for you that whenever you want to remove the parts, do the dry docking and all. So the previous model was a 90-day single shot 90-day predictor. But what we want right now is to calculate day by day. Like I'll give it timestamp 1 and timestamp 2 days, and it will calculate accordingly. That is what we want, and it will show the current hull conditions, drag penalties, and it will give the cleaning schedule. It will also like give better routes, like where it should go from to avoid more biofouling. Yeah. So the current contributions are that I created the 5-stage physics simulator, then the 80,000 scenario data set. Then I trained that on my random forest surrogate to get near perfect 90-day drag and macro follow prediction. Then I integrated this into the MSP platform by creating a heat map of the biofouling data. And the opportunities ahead are to integrate live AIS and satellite data for the biofouling prediction, and try to validate this using IOR data, which will get afterward, because there is no IOR data. I try to validate it using temperate region, but yeah, it works. But the thing is, temperate region and tropic region have different species and all. It's very different. So we'll need more data to work on that. Thank you.
You can't get a polar bear and put him in the Sundarbans.
True.
It's an apex predator. He can swim, hunt in the sea, on land, but it can't replace the Royal Bengal tiger.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anvi Mishra, and I'm pursuing Masters in Economics and Bachelor's in Electrical and Electronics Engineering from BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus. And today I'm going to be presenting my project report, which centers around quantifying the biofouling risks for the upcoming Vadhavan port. Now, Vadhavan port is a massive greenfield project, which is at its full capacity has 298 million tons per annum capacity, and this is a huge economic asset for local and global trade networks. And now Vadhavan aims to be a ESG focused green hub. So this requires proactive environmental and operational risk management. Now, biofouling for this port acts like a hidden tax that undermines the port turnaround times and the vessel efficiency. It also adds hydrodynamic drag that everyone was talking about before me, and it severely impacts the efficiency of the 24,000 TEU container vessels. And apart from that, it also poses infrastructural risks, as the dislodged biological matter can threaten the static port infrastructure. Now, what I have done to understand this complicated mechanism around this port is I have developed asset liability matrix that takes 20 factors spanning across economic, environmental, and social pillars. Now, what this matrix does is kind of make these biological impacts into tangible assets for a better understanding of how biofouling actually affects the port. And this framework is based on hydrodynamic modeling, and this is just one of the equations that I had used, and and what it basically tells us is the added friction coefficient due to biofouling. Now, the methodological approach that I followed is, first I have calibrated all the data according to a 24,000 TEU container vessel, which has a 24,000 square meter wetted area, which operates as 22 knots within the local coastal salinity. And second is scenario modeling. Now, before me also a lot of people have talked, but these are just the basic numbers. At the very early stages, there's just a 18.6% friction jump, but eventually it can become a 73.7% increase in total resistance. And the third thing is that I have calculated the biological drift times. Now, from the proposed Vadman port's location, only 15 kilometers away is the Tarapur Atomic Power Station, and it has its cooling water along the coast, cooling water intake infrastructure along the coast. Now, what I've calculated is that with the basic drift speed of the water, the dislodged debris will actually be alive and can severely impact the already existing infrastructure. And I have calculated it to be 10.4 hours. It can actually reach these structures and the living organisms can kind of attach and degrade the cooling water system. Next is that the true cost of inaction can be if biofouling is not properly accounted for, it can actually result in a huge fuel penalty, which, if we translate into economic terms, will be a 4.16 lakh rupee loss per hour per vessel. And this directly cuts into the carrier probability and the aggregate port through output. And next is, from my matrix, I have tried to quantify some of the terms. Now, first is possible regulatory fines. Now, if the sediments are not properly captured, it can actually be around 288 kilograms of active copper biocides in the water, which can be around a 50 crore exposure. Now, these numbers are not super accurate. These are based on previous fines and stuff, but it's a huge liability. Second can be the power station that I talked about. Now, per incident, the cost can be around 53 crores. Now, these numbers are very rough. These are not real life numbers. The port is not operational as of now, but it can be a huge economic drain. And third is that the fouled hulls can require mandatory quarantine, and this can, in demerge penalties and backlogs, can cost around 50 crores per year. Now, this is basically a framework that I've developed. Now, these can also be quantified in economic terms, but because there are multiple different ways of anti-fouling ways, so I have not exactly quantified this, but I have built a framework like mandatory hull screening, biofouling management, sustainability compliance, and carbon abatement can roughly make annual fleet fuel savings of about 350 crores. And 10% of this will directly go into the revenue ledger. Next is some policy directives that can help. First is standardized hull condition assessment, in which a formal port regulation can require all vessels with significant stationary periods to provide verifiable, non-invasive hull condition data prior to berthing. Second is zero discharge hull maintenance standards that will prevent the biofouling and the species to enter the water. And third can be a biofouling risk mitigation framework, which can take the oceanographic data and to inform predictive maintenance schedules. And with that, I end my presentation. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ishrit from BITS Goa, and I'm pursuing electrical engineering. And today I'll be presenting my project, which is on the topic the detection and mapping of fish farms and seaweed cultivation zones
specifically in India. So this is what I'll be covering for the next few minutes. And okay, so addressing the main problem, India is one of the largest aquaculture producing countries in the world. Yet, if you ask where these offshore farms exactly are located, nobody would have a proper answer. And the thing is that this information, this data, all of it exists, but it's scattered across half a dozen agencies like the CMFRI, the MPEDA, all of these, each of these agencies, they have a fragment of this data, but they're not willing to communicate with each other. And that leads to a very big institutional gap in India's blue economy. So to tackle the problem of detection in India, the most agreed upon method is to use a combination of two different satellites. The first one is Sentinel-1, which uses SAR. So it basically sends its own signals and it measures whatever comes back to it. So that is why it can be used in any climate, whether it's monsoon or it's a clear sunny day. And how it works is basically when this signal it strikes the water surface, it scatters instead of going back to the satellite. That is why the water appears to be dark, and like the water is shown to be dark to the satellite. Whereas when it hits like a rigid surface, like a cage, for example, it bounces right back to the satellite, and that is why these cages are shown to be bright as compared to like the surrounding dark waters. And the second is Sentinel-2, which uses optical imagery, and it relies heavily on sunlight, which is why it is useless during the monsoon season. And that is where Sentinel-1 can help us, like during the monsoon season in particular, which lasts for about 4 to 5 months in India. But an advantage Sentinel-2 has over Sentinel-1 is that it can be used to detect vegetation, like seaweed farms, for example, which is a major focus of my project. Then coming to my contribution, I was told to do three major things. Firstly, I listed out all the different parameters that affect this satellite-based detection. For example, you have wind speed, you have wave height, tide level, etc. And then explain how each of these factors, they influence the detection in both Sentinel-1 as well as Sentinel-2. And then using the Copernicus browser, I located two areas of interest. The first is a well-known fish farm site off the coast of Chipikulam, and the second is a seaweed farm site off the coast of Mandapam. And then finally, I monitored how these different parameters, how they change over a span of 1 month in these two particular areas. So it is mostly just theoretical stuff. Then, so coming to what affects SAR detection in particular, so firstly, the wind speed and the wave height, both of them go hand in hand, and they both basically they roughen the sea surfaces, and then this causes trouble in locating like the floating cages. And then tide level matters as it shows us how much the cage is actually above the water. So usually a lower tide level is better for results because more of the cage is exposed to like the signals. Then the angle at which the beam hits the cage also matters. So generally a steeper angle gives off a better return to the satellite. So the cages appear more brighter to the satellite. Then finally there's polarization where we use both VV as well as VH. And VV takes care of the more smoother surfaces, whereas VH takes care of like the rougher and the messier surfaces. Then optical detection has its own list of 5. So the first and the most important one is cloud cover. A higher cloud coverage makes it tougher for optical detection because of the lesser sunlight. Then there's sun glint, which is the reflection of the sunlight off water surfaces. And it basically makes the water look bright instead of cages. Like the cages are also bright as well as the water. And this makes the water indistinguishable from the cages that are around it. Then there's turbidity. So often at times these suspended particles, they get confused for stray cages and they get confused for stray farms, and that leads to the creation of like false data. So like something that is not there is perceived to be there. Then, as I mentioned earlier, tide level, it matters because it shows how exposed the farm actually is. And finally, the sun, the angle of the sun, it changes how the shadows and the brightness is throughout the day. So these are the 5 for optical detection. And yes, this so these are the 2 sites that I located. The on the left is the seaweed farm site, which is off the coast of Mandapam. And this image is from the Copernicus browser, and it shows like a green patch of it shows a green patch floating in the water that is slightly away from the coast, and that is how you identify a seaweed farm per se. And on the right is uh, the fish farm site, which was off the coast of Chipikulam. And here the image shows a cluster of evenly spaced dots that are in deeper parts of the water. So for seaweed farms, these farms are very close to the shoreline, but these fish cages and all, they're actually far away from the shoreline as compared in comparison. So yeah, that is how you identify like a fish farm as well as a seaweed farm on the Copernicus browser. Then the actual monitoring, it takes place in 5 different steps. So firstly, an area is chosen on the Copernicus browser that is to be monitored, and then an appropriate index is chosen. So it could be either NDVI for optical imagery, or it could be backscatter for SAR. And then these index values are taken over they're taken across every available pass over like a full month. And then along with this, the other parameters like the wind, as I mentioned, all of those can be taken from the Copernicus Marine Service browser. And then finally, all of these values have to be compared with each other before coming to a final conclusion. So yeah, this is an image of the Copernicus Marine Service browser. So firstly, an area, we select an area here. And then from the left-hand side menu, you select the appropriate parameter. For example, I've selected wind here. And then the timeline can be adjusted by moving the slider at the bottom. So you can move it to whichever, you can zoom in, you can move it to whichever month or whichever year you want. And then you can take the readings over a span of an entire month. So yeah, that is how you monitor these different parameters for one entire month. And these are this is a list of some of the references that I've just attached. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
A very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sridhar Pavraman. Thank you for joining for the presentation today. I think having witnessed all the comments, I do feel that we are moving in the right direction. As the last presentation for the day, I will essentially be summing up over the broader angle as to what we are doing here. What is it that we are trying to achieve? All these presentations that we see, all these projects that we see. What is it that we are trying to achieve here? And how we are integrating them, all of them, into a single complex system. So this presentation that I'm making is going to introduce the vision behind our modeling and simulation based marine spatial planning program. This is a vision that we have drafted for 2029. Now I'll walk you through why, what MSP is, why simulation based MSP is necessary, and what we are building, and how is it essentially an innovative aspect. Before we get into what it is that we are building, I think it's important to understand what we are solving for. What is the question that we're really trying to solve here? Now, marine spatial planning is not a new concept. Traditionally, MSP has been existing right from the time period when the Great Barrier Reef was started to be maintained in Australia. That's when the whole concept of marine spatial planning actually came into picture. And today, globally, it essentially satisfies requirements across multiple countries as a static map that represents all the key resources that are there present in the ocean. This essentially involves oil rigs and other any kind of planning layers that we can probably think of. Where are the oil rigs? Where are the shipping lanes that are present? And all those kind of static assets. Where do we find marine mammals? Where the habitats of those exist based upon historical data? All of that is what currently is present in the traditional MSP. However, the problem with the traditional marine spatial planning, and specifically for that matter in India and globally, is that it relies a lot on isolated data set, and that's one aspect that we are yet to conquer. So one agency would map the shipping route, another agency would map the biodiversity, the third agency would basically be managing the fisheries data, and so on and so forth. But they rarely speak to each other. And so what this ends up becoming is a static set of spatial plans that tells us where things are, but that cannot tell what happens essentially next. And the consequences for these are real. So there are two examples that I present here. One is, if you can see, so off the coast of Tamil Nadu near Dhanushkodi. During a coastal erosion, sea walls were basically installed to prevent the local erosion. But the installed sea walls, they did not take into account how sediment flows change seasonally. And therefore, what ended up happening is that it did not really resolve the situation. It just moved the problem downstream. So we started seeing that adjacent fishing hamlets lost their beaches, the turtle nestings declined in the region, and so on. The other example is what we are very much aware of what happened in Kerala with the Viringam port, a good $900 million project, transshipment hub, that was proceeding without accounting for how construction would essentially affect the fishing communities. And we saw that by 2018 there was a huge amount of protests that were erupted, stalling the complete project for years. Now, in both of these cases, the idea is not that there was absence of planning, but the idea was the concept essentially is that there is very little amount of information, or there is little amount of tooling where multiple agencies can come together or simulate uh, what are the issues that can occur in the future based upon the decisions that we take today. So that future-based simulation is what our version of modeling and simulation-based MSP is about. And ideally, even in 2022, the India's highest environmental court has ordered all the regional governments to try and avoid any kind of like hard shoreline defenses and things like that. That is possible, but even today, because of lack of comprehensive plans, we do still have such kind of siloed fixes. And this term of siloed fixes is not something that like we are. All of this essentially is quoted, and the fact that even the World Bank in the report in 2020 has represented is something has represented the fact that a lot of data sets are not shared and they are uncoordinated is something that we need to take seriously. So what does our modeling and simulation essentially come into picture? And this is what you would have seen from all the different projects that we have that have been presented before me. The first is essentially dynamism. Again, as I mentioned, traditional plans are snapshots. They are hardly updated every few years. But what a simulation-based MSP gives is a living system. So it ingests real-time data, and it basically takes the stakeholder inputs in real times and performs a scientific update. Second is the impact modeling. So because we are simulating, because we are identifying the impact, so instead of drawing boundaries based upon the current data, what we have currently, a simulation, let's say, essentially forecast what is supposed to happen if you take a specific actions. For example, what does a shipping lane would look like? Or if you change the shipping lane to a different, if you adjust the shipping lane slightly, then how does that impact the overall underwater noise in the region? If there is a port expansion that has happening, then how does it impact the sediment flow in the nearby sediment flow in the region? How are the coral reefs impacted? Again, a good example would be what oil spill drifting. So once an oil spill occurs, where does it drift? What essentially happens? So a kind of a future planning, a kind of impact modeling is what this MSP brings together. And this is what together we produce as a modeling and simulation based spatial planning. Now, in terms of the architecture of how we build this particular product, and this is a single product, this is a single tool that I'm talking about. In terms of the architecture of what we are building, at the top, we have a diverse set of data streams that are coming into picture. We have oceanographic data, we have ecological data, vessel traffic, human activity patterns, infrastructure information, and so on and so forth. All of this essentially feed into simulation engines. These simulation engines could be hydrodynamic models or ecosystem-based models, climate projections. Again, every single project that we saw today essentially relied on either a mathematical or machine learning model that was supposed to simulate, the impact of what is supposed to have, what the impact that is being generated, or simulate the outcome of a given set of data sets. Now, all of this essentially feeds into an impact analysis layer. This is where the platform answers most of the questions, like what happens to this reef if we reroute the shipping, or we saw some work that was happening around storm surge modeling. So if we take the same aspect of cyclone Sidr or cyclone Amphan with an increased level of seawater or sea water level, then how does that impact today, or let's say 5 years down the line, or 10 years down the line? That's what the impact analysis layer essentially brings into picture. And throughout this aspect, we are bringing in the community engagement and stakeholder consultation as a parallel layer across all of this. We have made visits to some of the coastal regions off the coast of Gujarat and other places, and try to identify what is it that the actual coastal community is looking for. And we're trying to develop a system that is more useful to them, as well as also something that they can provide inputs to. So on the left, what you see is what we are developing as the Marine Spatial Planning Toolkit, and the broader vision is to integrate the 6 different initiatives, as you can see. The underwater noise mapping, coastal and riverine flood risk, coral bleaching and risk forecasting, oil spill drift simulation, blue carbon ecosystem health, and marine biodiversity and habitat suitability. Um, every single project that we saw today fits into one of these 6 different initiatives. Um, if you look at the image on the left, which essentially showcases the tool, we have multiple planning layers. The idea is that a user essentially selects those planning layers, and we perform a simulation and give an output. So instead of giving just what the AIS traffic is, what we are representing is what is the both the source level of noise generated by the ship, so the noise generating from the propeller of the ship, as well as the overall noise that is being generated for the region, or the along with the transmission loss and everything. Uh, Along with that, we have wind noise. We have a lot of other such kind of elements. Again, as I will explain as we move forward. Uh, Now, the first initiative of underwater noise modeling, this essentially involves wind-driven noise, rain-driven noise, and shipping-related noise. All of this essentially, because any kind of ocean noise flood has 2 major natural contributions. So you have the wind-driven wave breaking, and as well as the rainfall impact that is being generated. So, and both of these are particularly significant for the Indian Ocean region because of the kind of monsoon that we see. So again, taking that into account along with shipping related noise is what the first initiative of forming the cumulative acoustic stress map is all about. Um, the second initiative for coastal and riverine flood. Now, we have a compound flood problem that dominates the deltaic region in the IOR. So there are 2 distinct flooding mechanisms. We have rivers that are overflowing from upstream rainfall, as well as the storm surge that is pushing seawater inland during cyclones and other such kind of extreme weather events. So what we want to build are 2 separate modules for riverine and coastal surge. So they combine, and we perform joint probability analysis to essentially identify uh, what, as I mentioned, if in case of a scenario of sea level rise, or in case of a scenario of any kind of compound flood uh, movement happening, how is that going to impact our waters 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line, with our riverine flood module and storm surge model that we are generating. The idea is to validate this against the documented historical events. So if we are able to reconstruct the same cyclone Amphan or same cyclone Sidr or other such kind of things that we have observed, observed flood events that we've had, if our model is able to validate against that essentially means that our model is performing well. The third one on the coral bleaching and risk forecasting. Again, the bleaching occurs when essentially sea surface temperature exceeds the local historical maximum. But temperature alone is not the only factor. Like if we consider temperature as the only factor alone, it essentially overpredicts where coral bleaching has occurred. So we have other stresses, like apart from thermal stresses, we have acidification, we have turbidity, we have nutrient loading, we have other such kind of stresses that come into picture. So in order to be able to identify a thermal refuge, yeah, we need to be, or basically the areas which are consistently cooler and the areas which are not, the areas where coral reefs are not impacted, we need to understand what are the different factors that affect. So building a model around all those different multiple stressors is what we are working on. And the idea is again to be able to identify which are the high priority coral reefs or coral regions which we can preserve to begin with first, and then move on in terms of identifying how to mitigate the impacts. The fourth work, again, oil spill drift simulation, 2 independent parts of this work. The first one being to identify oil spill, and the second aspect is to in terms of simulating the drift of the oil spill given the multiple scenarios of different ocean region, different monsoons, because we even with different monsoons, different wave heights, the flow of water, everything changes how the oil spill essentially drifts. And as we'll talk further, none of these initiatives are actually independent. All of them come together and they talk to each other. So an oil spill essentially tells us what coral reefs are going to get impacted. So again, both of these modules come and talk to each other. So that cross-layer intersection is what makes this MSP like a key player in this work. The fifth initiative is the Blue Carbon Ecosystem Health, where we essentially try to map because right now, even we do not have any kind of mapping of the existing set of mangrove and seagrass extent. So the idea is to first perform a mapping of where we have it, and after that, from those baseline, quantifying where the existing mangrove and seagrass can actually thrive based upon the environmental conditions and other factors. So that's the larger idea behind the blue carbon and ecosystem health. The sixth and the large initiative is around marine biodiversity and habitat suitability. So this essentially includes mapping of fisheries, sea turtle, cetaceans, and any other such marine mammals that thrive underwater. The factor that we are considering is not so the historical data of where the presence of these marine mammals were essentially tells us only. I mean, they are skewed. I mean, those results are skewed because they depend based upon where the sensors are and where the sensors could actually capture those marine mammals. They do not take into account the habitat those marine mammals require to thrive. So we look at it from the other way around. We look at for example, the content of chlorophyll, because the content of chlorophyll essentially tells us the feed for these marine mammals. So where the content is higher, we know for a fact that the microorganisms that are required as a food for these marine mammals are higher. We therefore map that as a suitable habitat for marine mammals, and not just based upon historical record of where these mammals have been seen. So adding both of them essentially gives us a habitat suitability model to tell us which habitat is suitable for which type of marine species, and that's what this work essentially is all about. So among these 6 layers, we have 4 modules that we have live today. So this MSP toolkit is live with SRN mapping. We have performed both cumulative and instantaneous noise map across the India's EEZ. So today, a user can essentially select a region and identify what is the overall noise that is being generated in the region, as well as I mentioned, we wanted to provide more than just static information. So it's not just about all of this is coming from live AIS feed data. And we basically we grab the data from Spire. We have an API, we make an API call to Spire to fetch this live AIS data and then calculate the overall noise in the region. The acoustic habitat mapping we have done for blue whales and green turtles. We have done some work on snapping shrimp habitat mapping as well. So identifying the indicators for snapping shrimps. And the potential fishing zone mapping is also almost complete now, where we identify what are the high probability fishing zones in the region. So these are some of the images from the models that we have generated. The background, what you can see, and again, as I mentioned, all of these essentially come together and intersect with each other. So to be able to identify the background noise and to be able to place a habitat map on top of the background noise effectively tells us which of the habitat is actually right now populated by a huge amount of shipping noise or wind plus shipping and rainfall noise. So this gives us a much more clear picture in terms of planning. This one's for the potential fishing zone. Again, the darker layers represent the higher probability, and the lighter layers essentially represent lower probability. Every single initiative that we run, as I mentioned, is coordinating with each other. None of them is independent. So initiative of underwater noise mapping, it provides us with the noise compounds that directly flows into the coral bleaching and risk forecasting, because again, noise is one of the aspects there. Noise is again one more factor for marine biodiversity and habitat suitability, so it flows in there. Oil spill drift simulation flows into blue carbon ecosystem health because they affect mangroves, they affect corals, they affect multiple biodiversity in the region, and so on and so forth. So the key idea is for us to have a cross-initiative tool where every layer feeds into each other and provides a better planning. This matters mostly for India because first, extreme variability. Now, India's coastline faces like some of the highest climate and human activity variability than any other region. And a static map does not satisfy our requirements there. Second is essentially resource constraints. So even if we wanted to do things with a proper set of even if we wanted to perform a blanket deployment of sensors to actually really record all of these kind of data and we basically derive these data and work on top of it, it is not economically feasible for growing countries to actually invest in such kind of blanket deployment of sensors. The third is data fragmentation. Now we know that marine data sits across multiple agencies, MOEFS, MOEFCC, and all the other different kind of agencies, but there is no single platform that gets integrated, all of that gets integrated into. So this MSP is expected to be a platform where both the data can be fed into as well as the data can be pulled out of. So we have public APIs that agencies can push data into and basically work along with each other, as well as pull data from what we have generated or what we have simulated and ingest that into their own platforms for their own work. And the last one essentially is governance complexity. Today, we do not have a single authority for marine spatial planning, even though it is being pushed extensively across the globe. Um, when we do derive such a such kind of a tooling, essentially will reduce the complexity of the governance when it comes to marine spatial planning. So this is what we identified that by 2029, this platform will essentially integrate all these 6 simulation-driven initiatives into single decision support tool, as we call it. Most of the initiative that we are doing uses either open source data, and in very few places we have relied on data that we do not opt in open source. And again, as I mentioned, 4 of the modules are already generated. The remaining initiatives are scoped. So we are hoping to deliver by 2029 the vision that we have for MSP. That is all from me. Thank you. Sir, any comments? Anything, sir?
Okay.
Yeah, okay, I can hear you now. I can hear now. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. So what I got a glimpse today about that the different technologies that you're working into. So I got to know that all these students over here, they are working in integrity. They are not working in silos. So I wanted to know what about the integrated platform? Like what is the? I mean. Have you already started with it, or like
Yes,
how?
ma'am.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So what is it like? So just
Yes, ma'am. We have already started with it. We have packaged the SRN as well as the acoustic habitat map and other layers. I believe if requested, Jay could also give a quick demo or glimpse of what we have right now. But yes, we have already started building it. The idea is to keep it cloud operational to the maximum extent possible. Of course, some of these modules cannot be operated in cloud because of the heavy computation required, but a light version of it, something that can be operated within the cloud as well, will be provided. So yes, we are packaging it as a single tool, platform, a solution where which multiple stakeholders can integrate into. So, and it will be open in the sense that you can both push data to be able to share with other agencies or other stakeholders, as well as pull data from our platform and integrate into the respective platform of the stakeholders. So for example, if someone needs shipping noise map, so they essentially push it. So they make an API call, they just push the AIS data that they have, they fetch the shipping noise map that we derive, and then they use it in their own platform. That is also feasible. So both way we are trying to allow it.
okay. Yeah, that's really nice. Like, but
Any MSP platform can be deployed for those kind of work. Not collaborating. She just messaged me that are open to collaborating with anybody. I mean, we have built this platform. This can be used by anybody. And this is very much dynamic in the sense that like most of the platform you see, we collect data and then data only captures that day's event. Now, what will happen tomorrow? What will happen day after? What will happen 10 years later? So, ours is, since it's a modeling and simulation based thing, it is very dynamic, and regularly this will.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.